Hey, and welcome to episode 112 of Killer POV. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rob G. Sitting with me is Elric Kane.
Senior Sniffles.
What are you drinking?
A San Pellegrino that I found outside.
It's and the loudest shirt I think I've ever seen. You're doing this such
last time I had a dragon. Now I've got a flower shirt.
Are you Bruce Campbell in that show?
Yeah, he's totally burned noticing this.
Rob, stop your lollygagging.
Seriously, you've been in like Hawaiian shirts, khaki cargo shorts, and sandals.
The end of
like,
summer, baby. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going out in a blaze.
This is the true Elric. He's coming out.
I think this is the true me.
Yeah.
I think the true me is a Hawaiian shirt. I think I'd
so
probably
too.
wear a Hawaiian shirt forever.
Yeah.
They actually, no one's made horror-themed like Hawaiian shirts.
Yes, they have. Go to Dark Dell.
Really?
Yeah, they have them
Are
there.
they Hawaiian shirts, though, or are they like Cuban shirts?
They are that
Cuban
exact cut, but with horror fabrics.
Okay. Well, what about like horror characters hiding in the flower? All right. I give up. I concede.
Yeah.
You can see.
Dark Dell.
Also with us is Rebekah McKendry. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi. So, a lot to go over, but why don't we start with events? Because there were a lot of events this week.
Yeah.
Becca and I were at a little thing called Scare LA.
Which was a blast.
Which is pretty cool. I went Saturday, you were there Sunday, so we got the whole weekend experience. But it's funny. This is, I think, the third or fourth year.
I think it's the third.
Yeah, it's only been a few years. It's this little convention that I guess the overall view of it is haunts. It focuses on the idea of the haunts part of like horror.
I think they call it a Halloween convention. So you're celebrating Halloween as a holiday.
Right.
So haunts are a big component. There's decorations, crafts, history of Halloween. They do have
Why
to haunt
so
your
early?
home.
Is it to get you educated for Halloween so you have time to take on these tips?
I think that it's
Seems just so early to me.
Yeah, you're right.
I think that it's definitely so that it kind of puts you in the mood for it. And it's the idea of you have prep time. And for the vendors, like, okay, well, now I can buy these things before the season. But yeah, it definitely, like, I left there going, I want to go home and put up my decorations.
Yeah, I think the best thing about it, because it was in Pasadena this year. I think they did it. Where did they do it last year? Like
LA
The
Pasadena?
past 2 years have been in this place called LA Mart.
Okay.
And LA Mart is pretty much like a furniture warehouse downtown, and they would take over a floor of it. But it is like a furniture store, and then this floor would have the Scare LA on it. And parking was always a bitch, and there weren't any restaurants around, and it was kind of, it worked, but they definitely outgrew it last year, and it was great this year. They spread out. They had haunts set up, like little mini haunted houses.
That's the key, because I went in, and there's sometimes when you're in a bigger space, there's a lot of negative space, and it just feels awkward when there's certain spots where there's just like all this negative space. But I went in the main exhibition hall and was kind of overwhelmed. Like, it was very similar in style to Monsterpalooza, where there's all sorts of effects demos and like different companies that are showing off like some of the newest tools and stuff like that. But the highlight and the key was on the right-hand side, there was like a full haunt.
It was like an entire hall that
maze.
had like 5 different haunts in it.
Yeah, well, there was one big one, and then there was a mini corner where it was like 6 mini haunts. So you just wait in line, and you go through like these quick little rooms. And it was really, that was like the standout. That's what made it really excellent, was being able to go through little mazes.
It's a shame they don't travel this show, because this seems like something that would do well outside of LA.
Well, there's a whole bunch of haunters cons that go on across the U.S. Some of them are industry, like you can't go unless you're part of the horror industry or the haunt industry. The biggest one being Transworld, which is in St. Louis every year and is huge. I've been to Midwest Haunters Con. There's one on the East Coast that's called like East Coast Haunters Con that they have in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania every year. That is amazing. That one's awesome. So yeah, there are these like little haunt cons going on around the U.S. And some of them will cater towards professional haunts, and then some of them cater towards home haunters. And that's one of the things I loved about Scare LA is the majority of the guys who had set up these little like haunts in there were home haunters. Because as I was standing in line, I was talking to them because I was so curious about, do you have a haunt local? Like, where did you build this thing, and where do all the props come from? And almost every single one of them was like, yeah, I live in Van Nuys. I just do this in my front yard every year. And they just like do it in their neighborhood for people. And they set up these like trash bag mazes with all the stuff that we got to see there. And these were like professional grade haunts. So they were really cool.
Yeah. Some of them were mazes. There was one that totally surprised, because you wait in line, you have no idea what you're waiting for. You're like, oh, I guess it's going to be cool. So there was one where I went in, and it was literally just like, it looked like the inside of a church. Like you just sat in a pew, and they did a live exorcism. Like there's an actor on the table that's like,
fun.
oh, and your pew just kept moving. It was like what are those called? Like a mechanical It was just all motorized, so like it kept moving while they were performing an exorcism.
Cool.
And that was the whole thing. They just did it for like 2 minutes, and you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
The one that I went through that I liked so much, it was the guy who says that he just sets it up in his front yard in Van Nuys. But it was actually designed to look like an outdoor area. So like there was like a garden shed, and then there was like bushes. And so it was meant to look like his actual like front yard area. It was just a lot of fun. Like the bushes moved at you and things like that. So it was really cool. And the coolest thing about that is while I was walking around the convention, at least 4 times people yelled, "Hey, Bekah, Killer POV fucking rocks!" And I don't know who they are. No one stopped to talk to me, but it was just really nice hearing that scream sometimes. It was you, just over and over.
I didn't tell you guys I was at Scare LA.
You paid people to come up to
I was in air conditioning. That's why I'm sick now. I was in 8 hours both ways to San Francisco in the weekend. And by the time I got back, I just was like drop dead sick from, I think, all that cold air. It sucked. But that's okay. I had fun. I went on roller coasters, which was really fun. On my wife's birthday, we decided to get rid of kids. It actually is. The older you get, the more scared you get of that stuff. And I got to say, they had one, whatever the main thing. I think it's like Medusa, and the drop is like 30 feet, straight down. And I've got to say, there's just that moment. But when you let go, I almost think you could do a therapy. There could be a therapist out there who goes, no, it's called like roller coaster. We take you to the edge and then we push you over, because you feel great afterwards.
Therapy,
once you scream, you suddenly feel kind of the sense of relief. It was good. I had a lot of fun. It was fun to be a kid again. Not since having kids have I had been able to kind of just do something fun, something silly and fun. So it was a nice time.
I always equate roller coasters to horror films because it's got that same build and then the like moment and the payoff.
Yeah. So. And also that's why I liked. That's my favorite thing about William Malone's House of Wonder, because it's such a fun twist to have him as a roller coaster designer. It's very cool.
No, it makes total sense.
I suck on roller coasters. Like I
suck more than I used to now.
I can look at them and tell them if I'm going to get motion sick or not. But there are certain ones that I can just look at and go,
this was a Six Flags, so
headache.
it was pretty intense. The rides are designed for all people who like rides.
Yeah, that's
pretty
great.
cool. But it was fun.
Last night I went to the premiere of Alleluia, Devil's Carnival 2. If you like the first movie, you will like this one.
Are they very similar?
This is much bigger. The first one was an hour long, kind of technically short, and this one, is a feature length, so it's 90 minutes long. And it's got an even bigger cast and more music and all that kind of stuff. I had mixed feelings about the original. I have mixed feelings about this one as well.
It looked very cabaret.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like musicals to an extent. I just don't get these musicals, and I love Darren, and I love Terrence and all the guys that are involved in these, and I mean, that's the thing. It's like the people they get together, the production design, the way it looks, like it's just so vibrant and kind of crazy and all that. I just have a tough time following what the narrative is supposed to be.
Well, the first one was Fables, right? The first one was very simple. I remember them. I can't remember if they're Grimm fables, but there were something.
It was Grimm's fairy tale.
They were very
Grimm's
simple.
Fables,
It was like the scorpion.
And, it was souls being welcomed to hell through these fables.
Yeah.
And
there was a couple really. I remember there being 2 musical pieces. The girl singing with the waves, and then the last one with the devil doing the stomp, which was just great.
The
like
wave
that alone
scene
was
not in the actual movie.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
It's my favorite one too. That's
I didn't know that.
I think that's the thing is,
it was a great one.
That's like the best piece of music in it, and I was bummed that it ended up in the credits. I mean, look, it is what it is. To me, a musical has to have strong music, and there's not enough strong songs.
How do you feel about Repo in comparison?
I don't know. That's a tough question.
Similarly, or do you have similar issues with Repo?
Again, I feel there's 2 or 3 fairly standout tracks in Repo, but I'm not a huge fan
Anthony
of
Head stuff is great.
Yeah,
that's the stuff that you
yeah.
walk away going, whoa.
And that's the thing.
Because like my favorite Repo were like Grave Robber.
He's good too.
Yeah, the
I mean, that's Terrence.
Anatomy. Yeah, that one was great.
I do like the way the devil looks in the first movie. They've kind of improved on the makeup a little bit, and you get to see him in different stages of like, because in Devil's Carnival, he's wearing like clown makeup essentially. Yeah. So you do see him as the regular devil at one point. You're like, oh, he's got like a little mustache and stuff.
That's fun.
Like, oh, that's pretty fun.
How's the Hoff?
Oh, the Hoff. He's the Hoff.
Does he sing?
Yeah, he's got a number in there. Yeah,
nice.
So that sounds good. But the standout was there's an actor named Adam Pascal who I was unfamiliar with, and I guess he's done a lot of stuff. But he's like one of the leads. Like Paul Sorvino is God, and he's like kind of God's like right hand, and he was like excellent, like amazing voice, really good presence, and really stole it.
Is he in anything we'd know? Did you look him up?
I did look him up, but it wasn't any genre stuff, so I didn't know what the connection could have been. Maybe he just was the best person for that part.
I'm looking him up right now because that name sounds familiar.
Him and like Emily Autumn, who's a big she's got a much bigger part in this, so she was really good. I always welcome Brianna Evigan in anything.
Now, was this one longer?
Yeah, it's a feet length. It's a feature length
90-minute movie.
Yeah,
so they're going to tour it like the same.
I think so. Yeah. And Christina Klebe and Brie Grant, I got to mention as well because they both appear in it and they have some really good memorable bits in it. So yeah. I mean, look, if you like the first one, if you like Repo and that sort of thing, then you'll like this one. Not for me, but I respect that it exists.
And take that reviewer from iTunes way back when who said, "You guys just kiss all your friends' ass." Fuck you, because Darren's one of his best buddies.
Yeah, he is. I love
so take
Darren.
that, whoever you were.
Yeah. All right, movies that we've seen.
Yeah,
I got 2. What have you guys seen?
I'll start because on the listening, because I was driving up to San Francisco, and this is really when I just love podcasts, and this is when I get why people love our show. That's the moment. It's when I am in a situation where I need to pass time, and it is like
same here. Now that I have a commute, it's like
it's pure gold, man. Like you're driving 8 hours and you do not notice it if it's a great podcast. Yeah. And I listen to. I've been meaning to check them out forever because I'm a big fan of his writing, his Bret Easten Ellis' shows. Oh, yeah. So I started with. And I've been tweeting about this, I started with the Jason Blum episode, Y'all Bosses. Yeah. And because I don't know much about his background, and it literally is probably the best single podcast I've heard since I've listened to podcasts.
Yeah, great interview.
Because it's fascinating. It's not just about horror, but it's fascinating. Like the stuff I never knew, like his dad wrote a Russ Meyer film that I know well, that film. And
which one is it?
It's the, which one was it? Not the honey one. The doctor something. We'll look it up in a second. But it's one that as soon as I heard the name, I was like, I've seen that.
And he took like $100 for it instead of a profit because like, this is never going to make money.
Yeah, which was just so funny. But his dad was this major figure in the art world of and he had was friends with all these art guys. So it contextualized, and the fact that he's like best buddies and roommates with the director of Squid and the Whale and everything. Yeah. It's like oh wow. So I didn't know anything about his background. Also, it was very honest. It was a great interview because also Bret Easten Ellis, what I like about his show, once I listened to that one, I listened to another. I really like this about his show because it's different from our show. Our show is us discussing things together. What I like is, you could almost say maybe he's a bad interviewer, but it's not. I think he's a writer. So I think he's writing these long
these
paragraphs of ideas he wants to get across, and then he asks a question. Yeah. But it really kind of worked for me because he's not some idiot. He's Bret Easten Ellis, so he has a very specific, I don't like everything he writes, but he has such a specific view of the world that you see in his movies. And I love the continual discussion about how Hollywood is now just superhero films and we're all infants and we're all doomed. It's a funny narrative. And Jason disagreed, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I disagree too.
So that was fantastic. I agree, but also I'm not too worried about it in the long run. There's always independent cinema. That's what I think. So after I listened to that one, which was fantastic, I listened to on the way home the Rob Zombie episode, which was not quite as great in terms of I think maybe it's not as interesting, but it was fantastic because what they spent most of it talking. And this is also what I like about a good podcast. The thing I like about the projection booth is the specificity of a topic. So instead of going, tell me everything about your life, Charles, it was all about the Manson project that they were meant to make together that went away because Aquarius popped up. Oh. And Aquarius wasn't meant to happen. And they basically guessed that what happened is they had signed on to do this thing together. Bret wanted to write a 10-part, the real story of what happened, the brutal, ugly, it's going to be great. They pitched it all around town. No one wanted it except CBS, I think. It was one of the, and they were like, really? They want it? Like, how are we going to tailor it? Anyway, so they're literally about to start, goes into the trades, and then the next day, Aquarius is happening. So they think that they basically saw a Manson show was going to happen, and so they probably rushed something that probably was dead, Aquarius, to suddenly let's make our Aquarius thing. And when that was done by a network, they're like the other, their network said, we can't do it. But them discussing in detail what it would have been about, and kind of. Manson, there's probably nothing more significant to Los Angeles, maybe, but, even the Black Dahlia is not as significant now, maybe at a certain point in time, but the Manson murders are really what defined the culture of Los Angeles in a lot of ways, especially starting in safety and the way people viewed hippiedom and stuff. And so it's fascinating to see these two people who were born, I think they're almost the same age, Rob Zombie and Bret Easten Ellis. So they both said that when they were young, Manson, they didn't really understand the bad parts of Manson. They just knew that he was kind of the same as Mick Jagger, or the way they viewed imagery of him, and he was kind of like the star, but they didn't really look too detailed into the horrific part of it. So they kind of analyzed why he's had such a lasting impact. It was really great. That element of it. I've heard the Alexandre Aja, in terms of horror ones, is also really good. So I'm going to listen to that probably next week.
Yeah, Ty West did one that I want to check out as well.
Yeah, I mean, Ty might be interesting because we've heard Ty. We've interviewed him so many times, but it might be interesting with a different person.
Yeah, exactly.
But these aren't just like, they're pretty good. I'd say honestly, if you listen to horror podcasts, those are almost essential listening because it's just a different insight.
And of course, if you are unfamiliar with Bret Easten Ellis, he's
wrote
the
American
writer
Psycho.
of American Psycho, the novel.
And Less Than Zero, there's a lot of slamming of Robert Downey Jr., which is awesome because he's the star of Less Than Zero. Not too bad, but and the other thing I heard that was really cool, and we're going to talk about projects that are in H.H. Holmes' film Devil in the White City that was just announced.
Yeah,
and that's one of my favorite books.
Leo.
Yeah, DiCaprio and Scorsese, one of my all-time favorite books. It's a history novel more than it is a fictional novel. It's a mixture. It's all set in Chicago. It's about the first World's Fair about 100 years ago. And it's basically about that time, because everyone's moving to Chicago. H.H. Holmes moves there, sets up shop in this big kind of motel pharmacy, and basically maybe kills up to 100 women. And he's quite charming. And basically it charts that as well as the development of the Ferris wheel and this big fair. And so Scorsese's perfect. The only thing that's a bummer is that it should be a 10-part like miniseries because of the scale of the book. So it's probably going to be a very long movie, knowing Scorsese. But to have those two people behind it is like perfect. It's going to be so. And if you've ever seen these like documentaries on H.H. Holmes, he's pretty fascinating. Yeah,
like he had vats of acid in his basement, and that's how he took care of the bodies. And it was pretty intense.
Just fascinating time in America where cities becoming industrial, so people don't notice when people are going missing so much, and you just think, oh God, that's so awful. It'd be like if hundreds of Facebook profiles are just disappearing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And then just lastly, the only film I saw because it was mostly traveling, I watched Blumhouse Unfriended.
Oh, did you enjoy it?
I did. So my only critique, I would say, yes, it's technically really impressive. Like on a technical level, basically this would be my review of this movie. It features everything I hate about movies and everything that's wrong with cinema, and yet the fact that I then enjoyed it is just unfathomable.
I agree. That was my response last week.
On paper, I'd be like, no, worst thing ever.
I really hate this movie, and I thought it was quite good.
But I definitely didn't love it, and I think the thing that stops you from loving it is never really goes very detailed into the supernatural side of it. It just kind of, there's something happening. And the actual deaths are really like generic.
That's what I mentioned last week.
They're not bad. They don't take you out of the movie. They're just like, oh, that's it. Like, I want something fucking crazy. Instead, they're but the build up and the story and the kind of tension to how they use technology, which is the part that should have been bad, is good. Is really good. I don't need a sequel. When I saw that Unfriended 2, that unlike Paranormal Activity, where I can see how the story with this, I'm like, no, I don't think I'd want to watch that style again. It's a one shot for me. Now maybe they'll not do that,
different,
and I hope so. But no, I think I paid for it to watch it on VOD early. I would probably say you don't need to do that. That might be more of a thing you wait for Netflix streaming or Redbox. But it's well done. I was impressed on that level. So
yeah, I definitely thought it was not ingenious, but it was very innovative.
Yeah, it was interesting.
I hadn't seen anything like it before.
It uses all the chat functions and all the screens because they use everything in it, everything.
Like chat roulette.
It does it in a way that keeps going. That feels like that's probably how young people would use them all at once.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like totally forced. Some parts are work better than others, but then you're like, but the actual horror. Maybe if they just spent a little more on that, it could have been a great movie.
Yeah,
I thought the deaths were really cheesy.
Yeah, like bad 80 movies.
Yeah, exactly. Like
bad slasher where it's like just the generic slasher ripoff where they're getting killed with a skewer through the mouth with
stapler
you're like, really?
in the ear.
It's that kind of where you're like, really? That's all you could go. But we're seeing.
Bekah, you see anything this week?
Yeah, I finished Wayward Pines, which I absolutely love. So I highly recommend that. It is on. I watched it on Comcast VOD, but I know it's probably on Hulu.
It's on Hulu Plus. That's the way that I watched it.
Yeah, so I highly recommend checking it out. 10 episodes. It's not overly horror, but it's very Twin Peaksy. And it does have some supernatural, not supernatural, sci-fi creature type stuff that gets incorporated into it. So, it's really good. This one I watched last night. So I was looking for something new that had released on Amazon last night, and I found this thing called Dark Place or Dark Places.
I saw that on Netflix. I didn't watch it.
And it's got Charlize Theron in it. And I got
based on Gone Girl writer.
The guy who wrote Gone Girl.
The girl who wrote Gone Girl.
Girl.
It's a woman.
Thank you. Girl who wrote Gone Girl wrote this. And it's got some other notable people in it, like Chloe
Sevigny.
Mortz, is in it, and so it's got some notable people. I won't call it horror by any means. And once I actually if you read the bio or the synopsis, it looks like it's horror, and the cover looks like horror. But once I actually watched it, it's definitely more of kind of a crime thriller. But she is the victim of when she was a kid, when she was 8 years old, her entire family was murdered in one night, her mom and 3 sisters, and her brother was arrested for it. Mm-hmm. And now 30 years later, this group, this kind of cult-like club they like to solve crimes. That's like the club's duty is they solve crimes, has approached her and offered to pay her if she will come and let them ask her any questions that they can about the night because they want to solve the crime because they don't think her brother did it. But her brother's still in jail. And so she essentially has to kind of walk back through the crime while they're doing the questioning, and then they take her to various places. And through the entire movie, everything that you think happened at the beginning kind of unravels and it becomes a completely different thing. So it's definitely kind of a murder mystery. But at the same time, and this is what I was fascinated by, it's set in the Midwest in the 80s, and the satanic panic plays a huge role in it, where everyone's accusing everyone else in the town of being satanic and saying that the murders were satanic and, oh, my daughter got molested by Satanists and things like that. And so you see a lot of kind of these heavy metal kids getting accused and judged and things like that, and how it kind of gets incorporated into the mindset of the town. And that I found fascinating just because I think that that's such a fascinating kind of paranoia in American history. And that definitely played into kind of the crime and how it played out. So the movie was flawed. There were some parts in it that I was like, oh, this isn't quite cohesive, but
is that the reason it's on VOD, not theaters?
I would assume so, because it's definitely, it's got some names in it. And it was definitely kind of a spare no expense thing because because they're investigating a crime, the thing probably had 50 different locations. So they're definitely, it was a big budget thing, but it lacks cohesion in parts, but it's not bad. So.
Yeah, I'm looking at the director is Gilles Paquette-Brenner. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I recognize of his is a movie a few years ago. I recognize the cover from 2009 called Walled In.
I remember the cover.
I remember that being like a horror title that I'd always be like, what is this? And he did something called Sarah's Key back in 2010. And now this, Dark Places.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Sounds like a Garth Marenghi play.
Yeah, I know. That's what I kept saying. I was like, Garth Marenghi. I wouldn't, on Amazon VOD right now, I think it costs $6.99. I don't know if I would pay $6.99 for it, but I would say if it's free on like Netflix or you see it on HBO Go or something like that, it's definitely, it's a good hour and a half.
In other words, you'd rather see Garth Marenghi's.
Any day. I would watch Garth Marenghi over most
moments
things.
Of narration ever where he goes, blood, and bits of sick. That's one of my favorite lines in the history of anything.
I love Garth Marenghi.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
The other thing that I'll mention is I saw this short, which we sent over to Elric today, and Rob had already seen it at the Bava screening called The Mill at Calder's End.
Yep.
And it's made by this guy named Kevin McTurk, who approached me at Scare LA, and he's like a huge fan of the podcast, and he was like, I love Killer POV. I just made a short. Can I send it to you? And I was like, yeah, sure. Here's my email address. Cool. And then he sent it to me, and I started watching it this morning, and I was kind of taken aback because I was like, holy shit, this isn't just like me and my friends made a short on the weekend. This is like 10 years of my life and blood and money. Cool. And it is a Victorian ghost story. It's about 13 minutes long, and the entire thing is done with puppets. And it's scary and good. And it's playing
young Barbara Steele.
Yeah, Barbara Steele.
Because a puppet, but it's really her playing it.
It's her voice.
Oh, cool.
And it looks like, Barbara Steele in her prime.
Yeah.
It's really
If we ever get Barbara Steele in here, we should also get the puppet. So we can interview both young Barbara and older Barbara.
And Rob mentioned this, and it's true. He said that when he was watching it, it took him a little bit to realize that he was watching puppets. And that's true. That is how good they are. It opens with a man riding in a carriage. And I think it's like a car. It's like an old-timey car. Mm-hmm. And you definitely have to kind of stare at it for a second, go, something doesn't look right.
Yeah, it's
Holy
weird.
shit, that's a puppet.
If you don't have the context, because this just showed up, played before a movie at the theater, like you're watching it and there's just something off about it. They're like, is this like one of those like Robert Zemeckis CG? Like, because they look like real people, but they're moving in a way that's like unnatural.
Yeah.
And then after a few minutes, you're like, oh my God, those are puppets. Okay. So it's one of the most artistically and well-crafted films of that sort.
Huh.
So
it sounds like something they should play at Monsterpalooza.
They are. It's playing a number of festivals coming up. It's at Fantastic Fest. It's at Styges. So it's got a lot of fests coming up. And hopefully after that, we'll see it online, in which case we should definitely share it on the page. Because, this, I can't even call it a short. It's like... it's its own thing. I can't even classify it as a short.
I guess I won't delete that email from you like I normally do.
I know. Usually I just go straight to your spam box, but thanks for setting this one aside.
All right.
So if you see this playing at any festivals, Millet Calder's End, definitely check it out.
Alrighty, and really quickly, I saw 2 movies this week that I wanted to talk about. The first, we talked about it plenty of times, like early on in the show, but I revisited Demons, the original Lamberto Bava movie.
Heck yeah!
I had a friend over that had never seen it, and then it's like, oh, you got to see Demons. It's pretty fun. And I still love it. I mean, Synapse put a really spectacular Blu-ray of it out about a year or two ago now. And just between the, you know what it would make a great double bill with? The Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Because they both have that similar weird 80s vibe. They both have weird punk rockers in it. They both
but that
have
one's scarier.
Soundtrack.
That one has got that, like they're scary demons.
Yeah. And I always
some of it's really gruesome.
And what stood out for it, because it's a really fun movie, but what I'm amazed that there weren't more demon movies in lieu of it. Like there's not a lot. I mean, there's Night of the Demons and stuff like that.
No, you're right. It's weird. Demons are underused.
Because I really looked at it from almost like a perspective, like, obviously it takes place in a movie theater, and then the demons in the movie kind of, they scratch people and then they become infected and become demons. And, not to spoil it, if you haven't seen it yet, you should see it. But what I love about it is it's got this like almost batshit crazy third act that involves like essentially it's like when they get out of the theater, it's like a demon apocalypse. And I'm like, oh wait, this is like, instead of a zombie apocalypse, this whole thing is just like demons are taking over the world essentially in record time. And I'm like, that's pretty fun actually. And nobody does that.
That's one of those movies where I really like it, and I think it's one of the few movies I like that I also think would be a good remake. Because,
I was just about to say that.
Just because of the era, it'd be interesting to see what you could do with a really savage, ugly horror movie, but now, with a budget.
Yeah, exactly. I was, and that's what I was saying. I was like, you know what? I don't know. I think I wouldn't be too opposed if they remade this one.
No, I think it could work. It's
Yeah, and then the other one, which I saw when it came out initially, and I really loved it on video, and I still love it. I really like The Rage, Carrie, too. I'm putting my...
Never saw it.
Wow, I gotta check it out. I've never watched it.
First of all, Kat Shea directed it, or like she took over the project at the very last minute. I thought she did an excellent job directing-wise. She did, she used to work for... She was an actress, and she was in Psycho 3, and she had a big part in one of De Palma's movies. I think she's in Scarface. And then she went on to direct herself, and she started out with Corman, directing Strip to Kill. Oh, yeah. And she did... it was like Drew Barrymore's like comeback movie as a teen, Poison Ivy. So Kat directed that as well. So this is a Kat Shea film, and I'm a huge fan of hers. It's funny now with a little bit of perspective and context. Like, I like that 90s era of horror movies. Like, when it was happening, I was like, oh, this is kind of lame. I don't like these 90s movies. But they all have a style and aesthetic now that if we look back from 20 years ago, that's really interesting. And the thing is this. It's called Carrie 2. But in a nutshell, there's so many movies that have copied Carrie that I feel like this is the best of the copied Carrie plots. Like, I mean, Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2 is really a sequel to Prom Night. That's, to Carrie. So that's it's a similar theme. It's another girl, Emily Burgle, who I think is in TV stuff now. And Jason London is the other lead. It's this whole football team that, it's got that mean spirit of high school. There's just the football team just has like a scorecard. They try to sleep with as many girls as possible, and then they get X amount of points for it. And the lead girl's best friend is kind of one of the people on the scoreboard, and she ends up killing herself over it. So I just thought that the theme of like kind of bullying and the way that people treat each other, and obviously because they're the football players, they can kind of get away with a lot more.
Sounds like real life.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sadly. Yeah.
And then the thing I love about it is, for no rhyme or reason, Amy Irving is in it reprising her role.
How weird.
So that's where the flashbacks and the connection to Carrie is. Like, there's not really much of a connection other than that. They do try to tie it in that this girl and Carrie have the same biological father, perhaps. Because I don't know if they even talked about that in the original Carrie.
He's also, I don't know if they ever say, but he's also Jason's father.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
How great would that be? There's just a supernatural dad.
That guy, universe.
I mean, yeah,
with crazy sperm out there.
His spawn, yeah.
Impregnating. I bet there's more than just those two.
But yeah, no, and it's got a great finale. I mean, you have to have if it's a Carrie movie, you have to have that Carrie-esque finale. I just, with having not seen it in 10, 15 years or whatever it's been, I was really impressed with it, and I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was actually a really fun movie. Which I'm sure the Carrie remake is not fun at all.
This is a Scream Factory Blu-ray, right?
Yeah, it came out with the Carrie remake that Brian Fuller wrote, the TV one with Angela Bettis. It's that's the thing. I thought that was a wise move pairing those two up together because I probably wouldn't want to own one or the other. But having them together, it's like, all right, well, now my Carrie collection is complete. And also, I haven't listened yet, but there is a new commentary with Kat Shea on this disc, moderated by Dave Dakota, who is one of our guests and a filmmaker in his own right. So I can't wait to check that out because I'm sure it's a good chat.
Yeah, I think to end a great Carrie film, you just need 4 things: blood, 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 and bits of sick. Just waiting for my moment.
Rob needs to watch Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. I think I've told him that.
I think Brian Collins
times.
has only ever tweeted me once to thank me for one thing in life, and that was mentioning that to him once. And he was like, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. It's really one of the funniest things in my life I've seen.
It is. Well, remember last year for my birthday, maybe I'll do it this year. I was going to have a birthday party at Jump Cut and show Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
I know the reason I know I don't even have to guess that you like it is the closest approximation for humor is what we do in the shadows.
Oh, great.
To be honest, that would be the closest I could come in terms of tone and concords, that kind of,
Okay, fair enough.
But it's British.
All righty, well, stand by.
Okay, welcome back. Today's guest, somebody we wanted to have on for quite a while. His name is Robert Parigi, and he's the director of Love Object. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you for having me.
The reason, but I want to add to that because
we have a lot of contextualizing to do here. First of all, if you listen to the show, we probably named Robert Parigi more than any other.
Yeah,
well, I'm going to tell you why.
I
will tell you this. The ego inside me. I haven't met many people. When I meet them, my ego, even though a lot of people are smarter than me in the world, but my ego would never admit that.
A lot of people are smarter than you.
Well, my ego would never let that happen. I mean, that's why I do the show with you two, because I know I have something. But
drink some more scotch, man.
But I will say this: the first time I asked Robert a question, it was on camera. It was at Monsterpalooza, and I was making one of these little highlights where you ask 20 people really quick, what's your favorite monster? And they'll go, I like Creepshow, I like this, I like the Frankenstein. And then, of course, I had to go and ask this guy, what's your favorite monster? And he goes, well, Frankenstein is interesting. Well, you have to go back to Descartes. And then he started talking about Da Vinci, and then he started talking, and it was like about it felt like it was 5 minutes. We condensed it. But it was utterly fascinating. There were many things I had to Wikipedia afterwards. And I remember thinking, and ever since, any chance I have at a party, seriously, I'm always looked to talk to Robert because I always find him fascinating. I really interesting conversations.
He always tries to work himself across the room so he can strike up a conversation with.
And one more other thing: the first time I ever saw him in my life. This was before this. This was my favorite moment. I was going to a Halloween party. It was my first year in LA, and he was outside the door, perfectly lit in the frame of the door as the Tingler, and he had the large centipede beast in one hand. He had the mustache, the white coat. Perfect. And I remember walking right up to you and going, that's it right there. You've done it.
Wow. Robert, how's that for an intro?
There you go.
It's Warren. The doctor in Tingler is Warren. Yeah, but his real name in the film, Warren. I can only remember the first name because I remember the way his wife goes, I've got you, Warren.
Oh, yeah.
Here I go. I'm playing how smart he is. Just don't ask him hard trivia.
Well, there's no way anyone can live up to that intro.
Wow. And thank you for bringing scotch. He brought scotch to this episode. So it may get a little I don't know. We may be incoherent shortly.
What was the last film I saw you about? Was it it was the Austrian...
Yeah, Angst.
Angst, yeah. So remember I've been raving about that. He was at that screening. We were talking before.
That's amazing.
Hell of a movie.
Messed up the only way German movies can be messed up.
Is this the one that's by, I can never say, it's like Butter...
He only made one film. He only made one feature.
It's not the guy, not the necromantic guy.
No.
Okay, because he has a film out called Angst as well.
Does he?
Yeah.
No, I think his films are on the same label, and Angst just got released. So
maybe that's it. Okay, if
it's the same label. Cult.
That means I'm getting them all under one press.
This is very different. I think actually I went into it thinking that same thing, like it was going to be like that, but it was its own thing. But we're not here to talk about it.
Well, yeah, let's start at the beginning because I've known Robert socially for years now, and we've talked about films films. He wrote and directed Love Object. That's one of his films. He's currently one of the producers on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I just, anytime I bump into you, it's always fascinating. We had William Malone on a few months ago for a Kickstarter project he was going to do, and Robert was going to be one of the producers on that as well. But I don't know much about you before that. I mean, it's always weird. You never say like, well, so where did you come from or anything? But I do kind of want to start at the beginning in terms of like, what was your entry into the business? I mean, did you come out to be a writer, to produce things, to direct, or what was the
I
first
came
step?
out to do anything I could possibly do. I go back to like the closing dead, dying days of Famous Monsters, and that was like my gateway into things. And then but it was already dead at that time. I mean, Star Wars killed Famous Monsters.
Really?
It really just wiped it out. So I was there, early, getting issue 1 of Fangoria and all that kind of stuff. But then when I went to college, I kind of got distracted by philosophy, and I started saying, I think I'll get my doctorate in philosophy. I think I'll be a teacher instead. But then halfway through that program in New York, I went to a double feature. I still remember it was Evil Dead Part 2 and Re-Animator, and had like this existential crisis. It was just like the floor drops out. There's that feeling of vertigo. It's like, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah. So
I just started pounding the pavement. Got a job at New Line Cinema through sheer luck, just as a freelance script reader. And from that, they were shooting a movie that had 2 weeks of location work in New York, and then doing the rest of the stuff here in L.A. So I worked on the one in New York. Do you
remember what it was?
Oh, yeah. It was a movie called Torch Song Trilogy.
Oh, yeah. The comedy, yeah.
Yeah.
The gay comedy musical, yeah.
Exactly. And my mom was just so thrilled because I got her Anne Bancroft's autograph.
Yeah, cool.
I was looking for a picture of her from that movie, The Gorilla, but I couldn't find it. So I just got some glamour shot, and my mom loved it. But anyway, that had location work there and then out here, which was great because within the space of a month, I got to compare making movies in New York versus making movies in L.A., and there's no comparison.
Yeah, there's no
comparison at all. Yeah, I mean, I was like, I was a PA doing all, traffic stops and stuff like that, and there were other PAs, and these guys are like 40 years old, and they're PAs, and it's like, wow, so it was a very different, very, tough scene out there. Anyway, I came out here, worked on that. The warehouse right next door to where we were shooting the studio stuff for Torch Song was where they were setting up the Freddy's Nightmares TV show. So on one of the lunch breaks, I walk over there, and I said, hey, do you guys need a PA? And they said yes. So I started working on that, and then just sort of went job after job after that.
Were you a big Freddy fan before you got involved?
No, I mean, it was sort of strange. I kind of missed a little bit of the Freddy cycle, only because the year that came out, I was in England going to school. And so I kind of missed it when it was new and big in theaters. By the time I got back, it was something that you'd watch on VHS. So, which I guess technically is how most people see it.
Yeah.
But I did kind of miss the sort of first run buzz on it. Of course, I really liked the first movie and everything, and even some of the ripoffs. Have you guys ever seen I, Madman?
Oh, gosh, yeah. We talked about it last week.
Did
it's
you?
amazing.
I love that movie.
Yeah, we were talking about it. It was my first time seeing it a couple weeks ago, and it blew me away. How beautifully made it was.
Yes,
it's just a great made film. But so on that series, we've had Mick Garris, William Malone. I know Tobe Hooper worked on it.
Dave Scow.
There's
a documentary in Freddy's Nightmares somewhere.
There really is. I mean, the pilot on that, we're shooting the pilot on that. Last day, Toby did the pilot.
Tobe Hooper, yeah.
And last day of shooting, it's a non-union thing. Everything's kind of a little bit, messy on it. Last day is like a 23-hour day.
I love that.
And even Toby's assistant had given up and gone home. So I'm still there. I got to drive Tobe Hooper home. Now everyone else is just, oh God, who are we going to get to drive Toby home? It's like, can I drive Toby home? and so we drive him back to his place in Beverly Hills at the time, and he's I get to talk to Tobe Hooper for like 45 minutes. The drive from North Hollywood to Beverly Hills, and then I go into his house, and he's got like the chainsaw from like Chainsaw 2. He's got but the thing he's most proud of is the iron spear from Life Force. At the time, that was the one he said, life force, you know.
Do you remember anything he said on the drive? Like, was he that type who gave you any advice or what?
Well, you know, I would ask. I mean, you know, and one of the things I asked him was, you know, well, Mr. Hooper, you know, you work for both the independent filmmakers and the studios.
You're a podcaster, basically.
And, you know, which do you prefer? And, you know, he has a scar. He goes, well, you know, fuck the independents, you know. And I can, you know, first it kind of took me by surprise. Oh, I didn't know. I don't even know if I can say that. Okay. But I didn't even know, you know, at first it kind of took me by surprise because, of course, you know, how much we love Texas Chainsaw Massacre and stuff. But if you look at it from the standpoint of a person making a career and making a living, you know, he didn't make any money off of that. You know, I mean, they got totally trashed by their first distributor on that. And
is that the sole person who got rich off that, or was it also people who then took the video rights? Do you know?
Let's see. I don't know the details on that, but it was the first distributor. I think it was called something like Bayreuth or something, or distributors, and they just completely took all the money. I think they were sort of mobbed up and stuff. And the first flush of huge money they got, and they just kept it and didn't give it to anyone. And so, you know, well, you know, you work for a studio, at least there are guilds to protect you and things like that. So it was it was kind of a wake up call in a sense. But he had a script he was working on. I'd love to see him do sometime. I forget what it was called, but it was like some sort of cosmic Ferris wheel that was a big, you know, scene in it, so this gigantic carousel. And I thought, man, that'd be great to see Tobe Hooper run amok on that.
Yeah, after Funhouse, it could be a follow-up.
Yeah.
What was the other, do you remember the other craziest episode, like, of actually taping on that show? It seems like they all just would have been like the Wild West. Were you on it
for the whole run? What was it, like 2 seasons or something?
Yeah, it was 2 seasons. It was 2 seasons. And, well, you know, I got onto the show as a set PA. And then about a week in, the executive producer calls me into his office and says, you know, my cousin wants to get his DGA days, so he needs to be on set, so you're fired. Ooh. And I was like, you know, well, gee whiz, you know, now, or you can go work in post-production. So I guess I'm working in post-production, you know. So I moved over into there, and it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because that department was just out of control. I mean, they had people who were in just way over their heads. And so by the time they fired everyone, I was like the only one left standing. And then a new guy comes on, became like my first mentor out here, you know, and sort of showed me the ropes. And, you know, I was willing to learn and work hard and do a good job for him, and he was willing to teach me. So Marcus Keys just sort of, you know, showed me the ropes in post-production.
Oh, that's so weird. Marcus is the family friend connection I have.
Marcus Keys? Yeah. Are you serious?
Yeah, he does a lot of commercials now, right?
Yeah.
That's so funny. He's the only when I moved out here, he's a friend of my wife's dad's friend. And he did Tales from Crypt too, right?
Yeah.
That's so weird. That blows my mind.
That's why
I'm kind of mind blown right now.
Yeah, because that's why I worked on Tales from the Crypt, is we sort of took some of the same crew over to that. But yeah, well, you know, Marcus is a great guy, right?
Yeah.
And so by the time the second season of that was over, by the time the first season was over, I said, look, you know, you're working out here. You got to earn a living. If you're going to earn a living, you have to be in a guild. So, you know, one of the things I did is I said, okay, I'm going to get into the Editors Guild. And so by the end of the second season, I had my hours and my days. Whole second season, I was doing the same work I always do, but I got it called assistant editor or something like that. And I had my days, and then got into the guild. So by the end of that show, on a strictly kind of technical, vocational kind of way, I had guild representation, you know, some good credits and stuff like that. But in terms of like out of control stuff on the sets, I mean, it was, oh gosh, there was this one terrible episode with Tony Dow and Sandal Bergman, you know, and people were disintegrating. and so that was like, that was kind of, this is all analog, right? I mean, 525, 1-inch videotape, all this kind of stuff. So we had to figure out how to make them disintegrate on no budget. And so I was actually tracing holdout mats with typing paper and Sharpies on a TV screen. And then we'd take those into the, 1-inch edit bays and put like soft wipe, around the edges. And that's how we were doing it. It's like, oh, well, when people got phased in Star Trek, they look like this. So we'll make it like that.
I'd love somebody to rerun those to that. Because I know there's some ways you can find it illegally or on disc, but I'd just love it to come back on TV late at night and play the entire run.
Well, that's where I met Bill Malone. Is that, the sad thing about the show is a lot of the people working on it, sometimes didn't really appreciate the opportunity they had. I mean, I was really excited when I heard about it because I thought, look, Freddy Krueger as the host to a show, it would have been a perfect 1980s Twilight Zone. Because you look at the Twilight Zone with Rod Serling, okay, and he's like the ultimate beatnik. There's this kind of cosmic compassion behind all the stories.
And their dreams.
Yeah.
So if each one's a dream, it's a perfect scenario.
And I thought, so for this, though, it's like this is the mean, coked up 80s. And so you're not going to have Rod Serling and all his compassion. It's going to be Freddy Krueger and screw you kids and all this kind of stuff. And I thought that would have been great. But, they kind of just sort of, phoned a lot of stuff in. They didn't really explore what they could have done. But I noticed some of the dailies coming in were just great. There's a big difference between these dailies and the other stuff. So I went out to the set to kind of look around and say, hey, what's going on? And that's, saw Bill and he was working out there and we got to talking. And then, we're sort of trading our monster bona fides at that point, And I said, and I used to order that stuff out of the back of Famous Monsters, those Don Post masks, And he said, oh, really? Which ones? And I'd say, like Frankenstein 2000, I sculpted that. And the demon, I sculpted that. The Caridian alien, well, Bob Short sculpted that one, So, but we just go through this list, and almost all of the ones that he mentioned were the ones that I just really loved.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so I had them with me, next day I, bring them to set in a duffel bag, and just say, all these things. That's where I met Bill. And but there were some great directors on that. I mean, John LaFia did a really nice episode, really did some cool stuff. And some amazing actors, and Wings Hauser came through, stuff like that. So there was a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, I have a vague memory of it, and maybe you could shed some light, but it's like, was there ever any specific, I don't want to say the word vision for Freddy's Nightmares, but yeah, I guess vision for the show, because Tobe Hooper kicked it off with what ended up being an origin episode. It was like the episode where Freddy gets burned and all that. But then after that, I remember it all being just weird stories, and Freddy would only show up twice, at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end as kind of the host. And then of the memory I have is towards the end of the run, then they started really pushing Freddy into the stories, trying to incorporate him. Yeah. So I didn't know, it's was it meant to be him just as a host, or then they figured, let's, we have Robert Englund, let's have him be part of the stories now, or whatever it was.
I don't think so. I think it was all just kind of, they were all just kind of vamping as they went along. Because as a host, he didn't do really structured host-like things. He kind of, did. But if you were doing that, then why did they all have to be dreams? Why didn't it just be, Crypt Keeper style? Here's a spooky story kind of thing.
Was there a showrunner? Like an actual person who was in control of the whole story? Okay.
Yeah. And so, later they started, I think, just because they were trying to find a focus, they started putting that in. And there was one episode where it was like Freddy's 20th high school reunion. And he shows up at Springwood and kills everyone. But there was this, this is all done really fast. I mean, low budget, stuff like that. And so they had, here's Robert Englund, full Freddy regalia, and they had the camera on him, and he's on the stage. And Carrie style, he closes all the doors and kills everyone. And they would do cutaways to all the different, people being killed, but they just needed Freddy's reactions. And instead of doing all sorts of different setups, there was just one lockdown setup on Robert Englund. And he's just sitting there laughing. Doing all the Freddy laughs. There were 3 or 4 of them. And he would just do them like that. And it was just one lockdown shot. And I pulled that out of the dailies and I looped it. And had a 1 hour, 3/4 inch video that I just called Freddy's Last Laugh. Ran it through the edit machine. I have that someplace. I gotta find it.
That'd be so great to upload. That's funny.
I gotta find it. But it's because it was just a 2-minute take of him doing nothing but
laugh.
But Freddy laughs.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And did that carry over to working on Crypt?
Yeah, because they started off using some of the same warehouses for that. And it was the same producer, Gil Adler, who went on to do like Constantine, the movie version of Constantine and stuff like that. So on Tales from the Crypt, it already had 2 seasons before I went to it. But it was kind of out of control as a production. I mean, that's a thing on TV. It doesn't matter how good it is. It has to be on schedule and on budget. And so they brought Gil Adler on to kind of, rope it in to, make it a functioning show. And so he brought his people from Freddy's, and that was like Marcus and myself and stuff like that. But before we leave the world of Freddy's Nightmares, the other interesting thing is it was right behind Don Post Studios. The Mask Company had an office right there on like Roscoe Boulevard or Webb Avenue, something like that in North Hollywood. And on one side, the back of their red brick warehouse, which I think might be the one where they shot the mask-making scenes in Halloween 3. It was right next door to, behind where we shot
behind
Freddy's
the
Nightmare.
Silver Shamrock.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
I could be wrong on that. They may have used the Glendale factory for that, so I'm not 100% sure.
But on Crypt, were you doing the same kind of role?
Yeah, same kind of role. Of course, it was a lot more fun because, it was a total quantum leap up in production values. I mean, you had incredible directors coming through, incredible composers, actors, stuff like that. Just a really fun show to work on. Bill came over, did what I think is probably one of the all-time best Tales from the Crypt episodes.
Which one did he do?
He did Only Skin Deep.
The one with we talked about it when he was on with the girl with the mask on.
And she okay.
Yeah.
At the end, she takes her
Yeah.
mask off.
And Manny Cotto did an episode, before he did Dr. Giggles, so it was a really fun setup there. It was Walter Hill was just amazing. I mean,
what was he doing and what was his regular capacity?
Well, you had look at the executive producer card on that show sometime, and it is a who's who of 80s cinema. And he was one of the exec producers. And so in the original early days of the show, he was one of the guys that I guess got HBO interested in this concept because, we're going to have big directors like Walter Hill do these stories. And he was one of the executive producers on that card. And he'd direct an episode every once in a while. And just an incredible guy. I mean, boy, he's the guy you should have. I swear to God, he's the guy you should have on this show sometime.
Oh, yeah, I mean, he's one of my favorite directors of all time.
Yeah.
I'd love to.
I met him one time on that red carpet or whatever it was for something. And he told me he was working on the Baby Jane remake. He had just finished writing it, whatever.
Really?
Baby Jane.
Yeah.
I guess it hasn't happened. That was like 3 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. But we were doing editing on his episode, and my office was right behind one of the editing rooms. And at the time, I was reading Goethe's Faust, and I also had this Tor Johnson mask in the office.
You're such a cliche.
I am. But,
I bet you're miserable.
but I had this like Don Post Studios Tor Johnson mask in my office.
That's balance. Okay, you've got balance in your life.
And so Walter Hill's sitting there, and he's kind of looking, and he says, "That's I believe that's Tor Johnson, the Swedish eagle." I said, yeah, it's Tor Johnson, yeah.
Wow.
And he says, and then he sees everything Faust. He says, oh, yes. And then he just starts quoting Goethe, like, from memory.
Wow.
And it's like, so the only guy I've ever met in Hollywood who could both quote Faust from memory and knew who Tor Johnson was.
That is pretty impressive.
Yes. So he's
But Robert, you're my Walter Hill. Because I believe you can do both.
That's just proof that the universe is like spiraling down to heat death, sort of entropy and things. That's true. But that was Tales from the Crypt, and it was great working on that show. Mm-hmm. A lot of fun stuff.
When did your desire to get your own movie made begin? Was it with a story, or was it just the idea I should become a director because that's I keep control?
Well, see, that's the thing that's so interesting because I did not go to film school. I didn't have such, informed ideas of what it is you're supposed to do, what it was involved. I just knew I wanted to make monster movies. I wanted to do horror. That's what I wanted to do. But, everyone just assumes, well, okay, I want to be a director because that's kind of the thing you see. I mean, everyone knows Alfred Hitchcock and stuff like that. But in terms of how one would actually do that or progress to that, I didn't have any idea. It was just, I have to earn a living, I have to, get a job and do things and all of that. So I kind of, gradually worked my way there. I mean, working on a lot of these smaller TV shows, one of the benefits is that there was a lot more opportunity. If they needed someone to direct second unit, a lot of times I would go out and do that. So then I started to get a better appreciation of what's involved. And then, seeing how some of the stories on Freddy's Nightmares, like, guys, you could have done this. And then you just start doing it yourself. And so, that's when I started writing scripts and things like that, and really getting serious about directing something. And which worked out great because, like, again, at the time on a lot of these shows, oh gosh, we got to shoot these makeup effects. I don't want to do that. I'll get him to do it. It's like, yes, let's shoot the makeup effects, And then this later show, I mean, I noticed it just because there's some rumor they're going to bring the show back. Dark Skies, I was working with Todd Masters on that, and no one wanted to do that stuff. I was all over it. I got to shoot effects stuff and second unit, just straight up second unit and makeup effects and things like that. And then, one of my first shoots on that, we had to tie poor little Megan Ward down to some like gynecology table and have these like little worms crawl up her nose, for the alien parasites. I said, this is where I need to be.
You found your home.
I belong here.
Yes.
That's really funny. Well, sometimes that's a great way to come to anything, is to fill the lack of what you feel like people aren't taking, which is you saw all these people wasting this opportunity. You're like, I can do that. And you kind of fill the void of what you want.
Well, also, I mean, like, if, I don't really have desires to direct. I'm more a doc guy. But, like, if I did want to, the thing I'd want to do is the effects stuff. Like, that's what I'd be waiting for, is like, all right, how are we going to pull that off?
Yeah.
So it's funny to me that some directors don't even, like, want to do, like, oh, God, how are we going to do this effect shot?
When you finally get to make a movie, is that the first script you were really trying to get made, or were there others that just along the way didn't?
Oh no! Well, Love Object was like the second script that I wrote, and the reason why it got made is that the first script that I wrote got a lot of attention and got me some jobs. I mean, it got me a TV writing job on some horror anthology show. I just did one script for them, and a Blair Witch sequel that didn't get made, but Mike Manello, one of the producers, said was the best of the scripts they got. Before they brought Joe Berlinger on, they had like three random guys. I don't even know who the other two were. And they just said, okay, you guys go off and do a story.
What would your take have been?
I was going to say, we can't gloss over this.
Because I'm not a fan of the sequel as it is.
I do like Book of Shadows, so we need to hear what your take was.
Well, my take was, again, I was going to keep the found footage angle, because that was kind of a defining thing.
Because it made a lot of money, too.
Well, but also it's like, well, okay, what can I do that's interesting with this? And everything I write is true. It's just more true than real life. Right. And I'd heard this story about a guy who had been wrongly convicted for murder. And when he finally got out of jail, carried a video recorder around with him all the time to sort of prove, if anything ever happens again, look, here's where I was. So in my story, it starts off with two kids out in the Burkittsville woods and stuff like that. And their tent starts getting all shaken and stuff. And they're screaming and yelling. And then it turns out to be a prank that another one of the kids is pulling on them. And while they're like, oh, you jerk, you're doing all this stuff, they see someone weird in the background and they pan over, and it's Heather, who, however many years later, is suddenly reappeared. But her whole body is covered with these weird runes, like the ones that were in the cellar at the end of the first one, right? Well, so that's like the starting off point. The two guys, they never show up. They're gone. But she's back. And now all of a sudden, the parents of those other two kids, they hate her. Well, what are you doing? What happened to them? So there's a lot of survival guilt and anger and stuff like that. And it kind of builds to the point where she's got to go back into those woods to figure out what it is. And her kind of neurosis now is that she's always carrying a camera around, like that guy who got out of prison.
So
right?
you justify it.
Yeah. And so kind of group her and a couple of other people, because it's not like Aliens where the Marines go back with you. You're just some weird freaky kid who disappears. So she collects whoever she can, and they go to investigate this, and it kind of
takes a detour into sort of Wicker Man pastoral horror territory where
I like it.
You don't really know who's a member. There's a whole witch cult, and you don't know who's a member and who isn't, and all of this. And it finally, people start her friends. They're in the woods. They start disappearing one by one. All that kind of stuff. So it's just her again. And like in the first movie, the sort of shock shot at the end was the kid in the corner and what's going to happen. Well, in this, the kind of you've sort of laid the trail as you go along, all sorts of alchemical symbolism and stuff like that. You find out that what they're doing is the cult is actually trying to create a new Blair Witch. But it's only, what is a witch? It's not like, Wizard of Oz, witchy poo kind of things. You don't exactly know what it is, but whatever it is they're going to create requires both a male and a female component.
And so, you see those alchemical illustrations of like the hermaphrodite where you have a female body and a male body and they're like sutured together. It was going to be like that. And that's when she sort of finds the weird underground chamber where they're going to do that to her. And that's kind of the shock end of the movie.
Fuck you, Berlinger.
No!
You just ruined what could have been an awesome movie.
When are we doing a live script read of this?
Yeah,
that sounds really fun.
Yeah,
I've still got it someplace. I mean, but yeah, I wonder how it would read it might not be bad for a live read because it is, since it's found footage, there's a lot of dialogue.
Kane, get on it.
Next month at Jump Cut.
Yeah, it sounds interesting.
I mean,
that and Deep Cut. Those are
double feature.
Those are the two that need to be read.
Or do it as a radio show. We should bring it in here. That's interesting. I mean, that's still great. That's something I guess a lot of people don't realize, that the writer's life is often a career of unmade projects, a career that paid you money to not. I think I had heard about the guy who did the last Mission Impossible. He's a friend of my friend Nick Simon. He said that guy had just failed upwards. Like every project had made him more and more money, and not one of his things had been made. Yeah. And by the time he got to Mission Impossible, he was already rich. He'd had this long career, but it wasn't until that one, that a movie got made.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
And let's go back. So what was, before the Blair Witch sequel, so you had a script that got a lot of attention. What was the story behind that first script?
This is my passion project.
Still,
so you can't talk about it.
No, I can totally talk about it. Are you kidding? I can't not talk about it.
Passion projects are like, I keep this one close to the belt, guys.
No.
Other producers listening.
Yes. It's called Chrome Gothic. And it's this strange story that combines like automotive culture with surgical fetishism. So it's sort of like, I guess Fast and the Furious meets Little Mermaid, sort of meets Re-Animator.
Mad Max has a little bit of that.
Because it's surgical fetishism. It's very Little Mermaid.
Because it's very romantic. It's very romantic.
Right, there you go.
You see, our heroine is this beautiful albino whose life support is her hot rod. And the only way she can survive is by transfusions of fresh human spinal tissue. So she has like the fastest car on the road. So she has a police scanner. And whenever there's a big wreck, she races out there, has this big mechanical claw that she uses to open up the car, and this like siphon suction gun that sucks out all the spinal tissue, then closes up the car again. The wreck, gets in her car, sticks the thing in the dashboard, the tubes go into her body, give her the transfusion, she races off, right? Meanwhile, so the cops eventually show up. All takes place out in the desert, like between LA and Las Vegas. When the cops show up, there's just another wreck with these people with holes like hamburgered into the back of their neck, It's like, it's the leech. The leech struck again, And of course, our hero in the piece is this guy who, videotapes accidents and stuff for the news. Dude, this is way before that Jake Gyllenhaal thing. Way before that, right? And so he's tracking this down. There's a wreck when he's trying to chase her down at one point. So now she's captured. And at that point, you find out, well, where the heck did she come from? And at that point, we find out that she's the fugitive surgical love slave of like the head of the medical underworld. All the black market organ transplants and pharmaceutical testing and glandscaping and tissue culture and all of that.
Hold on. What's glandscaping?
See the movie and find out.
Okay.
Wait, no. Fund the movie and find out.
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to have to pay for this just so I can find out what glandscaping is now.
And so basically it becomes a kind of love on the run sort of thing with these two lost souls, the guy who's doomed to videotape accidents and the girl who's doomed to feed upon them, So
to get it funded now, you don't do, your pitch was old. Now you need to be like, it's Fury Road and Nightcrawler.
Yeah,
and
there you go.
The money. It's
there
like
you go.
Everyone wants to fund that movie.
Yes, well, that's why I want everyone to know about it now, is because everything comes around again. This was the first script I wrote, and I've been trying to get it made ever since, and came really close to a couple of times. But again, it's fascinating to see how things have changed. When I first wrote this, no one would touch it because they said you can't have a female action lead. And it's like, Mike, and at the time I thought that was so stupid because like Buffy the Vampire Slayer was on TV.
Yeah.
And it's like, what, you never saw Aliens?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, this was not like avant-garde or controversial, but the received wisdom is what it is until those guys die or, go work in investment banking or something. And so now it's kind of come around. And and that's just the beginning. And
obviously the scale's bigger than Love Objects.
Yeah, so I mean, Cars. I haven't even gotten to all the mutants and the whole underworld and all that kind of stuff.
This just got big.
So it's just fun. But it's very fun, very strange, very weird. It was like the first script I wrote, and I thought, you gotta think that every script might be the last one. Mm-hmm. So I thought if I was only going to write one script, how could I put everything I loved the most into one story? And so I did, and it got a lot of attention. It got me that job writing with Marilyn Manson on his project.
Oh wow!
Wait, which project was that?
It was a project called Hollywood. He did that album called Hollywood, and it was the idea was that it was going to be like a transmedia is what they call it now. But back then it was just synergy. There would be like a movie and an album and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was a great, wild gonzo story about a dystopian future, kind of like a Jodorowsky movie. And the world was sort of run by a celebrity-worshipping teen suicide cult. And we turned in our first draft the week of the Columbine massacre. So just done. That project was just toast. It was never going to go anywhere after that.
One of his music videos for that album actually copied the Holy Mountain imagery. I remember him dragging the crucifix and remade a few scenes from that.
This was like really trippy. I mean, it would have been, it'd be amazing, But what...
timing's everything.
Timing, but also, you need to pay attention to the business model. And to a certain extent, I think that may have been sort of a mistake on this project. You got to remember, at the time that this came out, Fridays had just made a boatload of money for New Line. So basically, if you look at Fridays the way a studio looks at it. Okay?
Friday the movie?
The movie.
With Ice Cube?
Yeah, all that. Yeah. Okay. It's like, okay, music star, $1 to $2 million budget, sort of a niche devoted fan base audience, go. Okay. Well, this thing was turning into $10, $15 million movie, and it was an art film. Really, it was an art film. It's like imagine Julie Taymor's Titus with Marilyn Manson, and that's more what this thing would have been, right? Well, when I kind of got a read from the studio, after talking to them about our first draft and sort of figuring this stuff out, I said, okay, look, they're never going to go for this. And so I pitched Manson on another project, which I thought would have been awesome, but he didn't want anything to do with it. And it was going to basically be a rock and roll version of Fall of the House of Usher.
Oh,
interesting.
And rock and roll gothic is always good.
And so the idea is, Salton Sea,
I love that movie.
But like that place, that actual
the
place,
Sea
right?
is revolting.
Well, see, so that's where Usher lives, So Roderick Usher is this deranged rock demigod in this crumbling mansion right by this toxic lake. And it's sort of like, what is it? White Stripes, you got that brother sister sort of thing. Well, this Madeline Usher, and Roderick Usher. Yeah. So you have that weird incesty thing going on and all of this. And his last album is like a year overdue, and all of his deranged fans are camping out, waiting for this thing to come out. And the investigator who comes in to sort of, see the story is like the A&R exec from the studio, which is like, dude, where is this album? And then the story unfolds, House of Usher, except when the house falls, it's because, he's finally realized that Madeline is dead and all this kind of stuff. You have your big scene and he cranks up all the amps, and basically it's his last concert, the amps are so cranking and vibrating. That's what causes the House of Usher to crush
this is badass.
into the toxic lake, It's like, but he didn't want to do it.
Did you work with Marilyn in person on this?
Yeah.
What was he like as a collaborator?
On his thing, on Hollywood.
Yeah. What was he like as a collaborator?
Because even to this day, he seems like a pretty big cinephile, and I mean we see him in all these small screens for all these little.
He's all over
horror
LA.
movies.
Yeah. No, he is a really intelligent guy, and really interesting in his interest and taste. Like I said, his model for this was Jodorowsky. How many rock stars do you know who, I'm going to make a movie. Oh, let's make it like Jodorowsky.
Right. Yeah. And also Lynch was obviously an influence because he was in Lost Highway as well.
Yeah. So he was that. Look, I have a lot of respect for Manson. I love his music. I love his performances. I feel like in a lot of ways, Lady Gaga has just made a fortune doing a softer, wimpier version of Manson stuff. She sort of borrows a lot of the fashion and sort of art world influence of Manson, but takes anything that's like cool and creepy or intimidating or challenging. She just takes out of it. It was very interesting working with him. A very open collaborator. He had certain things that he really wanted to do, which you do in the first draft. But if there was a second draft, you'd have to do some things and all. But he was I'd love to see him do another movie. I mean, it's like he's been in a lot more acting. I just read online he's in some movie now where he plays, I think, a Native American hitman.
Yeah, I saw the trailer today, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
On a side note, there is a documentary on the Salton Sea, like the creation of it and the fall of it, and then it interviews a lot of the modern day residents who still live there, and it's narrated, and I think it was actually made by John Waters. And it's fascinating. Wow. It's on Netflix Instant Queue, I'm fairly sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Like Centralia would be another good place to sit, something like that, where the coal mines are on fire forever and the smoke rises through the cracks. I went there once. It was amazing.
There, It's
just
crazy.
like, oh my God, how is this a real place?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So let's go to Love Object, because obviously it's between these things. How did you get the chance to make that? Because it's an indie film, definitely has the feel of an indie, but it also had a decent budget from the look of it.
Well, it's like again, you have to follow the money. I mean, it was this is where some of it is. Fortune favors the prepared, right? And so I'd been writing all of these scripts and everything like that, and then the .com boom comes along. And suddenly, digital becomes a strange magic word that people will suddenly open up their wallets and just dump bags of money on the table if you say, digital, So it
was shot digitally?
No, it wasn't.
Because I was going to say, I watched it last night again, and it looked like 16 to me. It had that grain, the fine grain.
Which is something we really had to fight for. But the money for it came. Ed Pressman, great producer, total gentleman, total scholar. He'd gotten a pile of that money by saying digital content and made a company called Content Media, and their original mandate was to make digital content shot on digital movies. And some of them were, but some of them weren't. Ours wasn't. And they had a variety of budgets. I mean, in that slate of 5 movies, there was Love Object, The Cooler, Hebrew Hammer, which is like a fascinating, funny cult item about like a Hebrew superhero. It's but it's all blaxploitation style. Is it Andy Dick? I think plays an evil elf in that. Because there's. But anyway, interesting movie. I mean, so some of those were shot digitally, but like Cooler in my film, they had 35. They had full on 35 for that one. But we did ours on Super 16. Because I've been kind of following Super 16 all the way back to like Drotzman's Contract, where they shot that on Super 16 and stuff like that.
Greenway, right?
Yeah. And so you could, why not shoot it on 16, which was important to me because the story had so much perversion and sex in it anyway. That if you shot it on video, I just thought it would feel like a porno movie, as opposed to a film about that whole porno universe. And there's 2 very different kind of feels for that, And so I said, well, no, I want to see grain. I want it to look like it's film. And, so we managed to work out a package where we did like a poor man's DI. We shot the thing on Super 16 and then transferred only the final selected takes to digital tape at that point, and then at that point it's just like a TV show.
And did that story come because you were a lonely creep?
No, actually the exact opposite. We were, so I was co-producing another show, Sleepwalkers. David Goyer was on that. That was
Wait, is that he did after McGarrett?
No. Okay, this was a different thing.
Sleepwalkers. That doesn't ring a bell.
It's because it was only on the air for like I think 2 or 3 episodes. We did which was another great opportunity to work with Bill Malone. I mean, how great a director this guy is. He did the first episode of there was the pilot, which David Nutter did, right? The guy who every pilot he does gets picked up, except for one. So he did the pilot. First episode was directed by Bill Malone, and it so freaked out NBC that they said, we can't air this. It's too creepy. It's too weird.
It's called Sleepwalkers?
Sleepwalkers.
Nothing to do with the movie.
No, it's psychologists invent a machine that allow them to go into their patients' dreams.
Oh, cool.
In order to
that
save
sounds
them.
perfect for Bill Malone.
Oh, and there was this one amazing thing he did. there was this one set that he had it painted with all the colors reversed, so that you would like it was negative instead of positive print. So then you could have like your actress, your lead character, walk through it and then reverse the color, and the background would look normal, and she would look like a weird glowing kind of negative, right? So all these kinds of amazing in-camera things. It was always really creepy, really weird. He made a couple of great masks for it, sort of things with like, bolts coming out of the eyes and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, so the network was so freaked out by that, they kind of started airing the softer episodes that followed. Show got canceled, but we still had to finish for the studio, even though the network didn't want it. We had to finish the 8 or 10 episodes.
Oh, weird. What a weird situation.
Well, because, you could, the network had agreed to buy 10 of these things. If they cancel it after 2, they still have to eat the other 8. They just dump them on 2 in the morning or something like that, right? So the studio was going to hold them to that contract. And so we were finishing post on the remaining shows, and I held off post on Bill's episode because it didn't matter at that point what order you deliver them in, right? I held off delivery on Bill's until the very end. And so all the money I saved from all of the, crappy episodes, I just dumped into Bill's. And we got like a great composer, Frank Becker, to come on and do this really creepy score. And we just went hog wild on his episode. And at that point, no one's watching. No one's watching because the show is dead. It's a total zombie. And he turned into just a great episode. Naomi Watts was in that show.
Wow.
Well, again, so strange. So the original script on that, because they're all going into dreams, right? One of the characters on the dream team was going to be a woman who was half Australian Aborigine, because, the dream time and all this kind of stuff. And I'm reading that in the script thinking, oh, wow, that, it's pretty cool. It's going to be neat. I go to set for the first day of shooting, and I'm looking around. Where's the half Aborigine? And then I hear the dialogue, and it's Naomi Watts. And I'm thinking, that changed fast.
That's an albino version of an Aborigine.
Well, look, of course, she's an amazing actress, right? So there's nothing,
She's no David Guptill. Walkabout.
But she was an amazing actress. And, we're doing the pilot, and we have to do some ADR. It was so terrible. It was like the day her grandmother died, I had to record ADR with her. And I'm saying, can we get this one more line? I was like, oh, my grandmother died. I want to kind of fly back to Australia. And I had to get the lines that we needed to get, And I feel sorry because she was
together, mate.
Because she was, because she was great. I mean, she was a very nice person, very beautiful, very talented. So but you got to do what you got to do. You got to get the...
Yeah, I love how when, Mulholland came out, it's just like, who is it? It's like seeing this person for the first time, but there's a person who probably had a 10-year career trying to make it before that.
8 episodes of Sleepwalkers that no one ever saw,
What, is that available, Sleepwalkers?
Yeah, I really want to see
Or just Bill's?
Bill's is totally worth watching.
I'd like to see
And
it.
when you see it, the big question is, and I do not know which is the chicken or which is the egg, the episode Bill directed is almost the exact same story as The Cell.
Really?
Wow.
Serial killer abducts girl. Where is she? Ticking clock. Gotta find her. Go into his head before he dies. Kind of thing.
Wow.
And I don't know which came. Which was chicken or which was egg. But Bill just tore it up. I mean, as he always does. I mean, it was a really cool show.
Yeah, he's a funny director. He's one of those guys. Even though he's been trying to get these independent films made, he's one of the guys that I really feel benefits with money. I don't feel like all filmmakers need money to make movies, but I look at his stuff and I go, you know what? There's just something about what you do that when you have money, it just elevates everything.
Well,
here's what you're able to do.
Here's how. First of all, absolutely, everyone should give Bill millions of dollars to make movies. Absolutely, but
done.
But the one thing I want to say though is, probably especially in Bill's case, more important than money is time. If you took movies that we watch now usually have budgets, $200,000, $300,000.
Yeah, that's true.
If you gave that $200,000 to Bill Malone and then and gave him a long, just if you gave that to him, you would have a movie that looked like it was a $2 million movie because of everything he knows and his vision as a filmmaker. So yes, I'd love to see him get huge money, but it's not like he's one of these guys who can only work inside of a studio system.
Well, no, he's done a lot of independent, but there's something about it's almost like this elevation of what he can already do. that makes the world feel more like I can get lost in it more. I mean, that's why I think after House on Haunted Hill, it makes no sense that he didn't get more shots to make bigger films to me.
Well, that's that. There is an arbitrary aspect to the industry. It's just some things happen, some things don't, and it's not like they're. It's random. Some of it, I think, honestly, is that there is an enormous surplus of talent. I mean, without exaggeration, people come from all over the world to Los Angeles to make movies. And that's different, I think, than almost any other industry in the world. It's not like, I'm sure a lot of people go to New York to work in finance, but there's other places. You go to London, you could go to Hong Kong or, wherever there's a stock exchange, This is the only place where there is this happening to this degree. And people, you're in competition with the entire world right here. And that's why, when I write scripts, I almost always write big female characters, female leads or female characters, because that's one of the amazing surpluses we have out here, are both beautiful and talented actresses. So it's like, well, great. I mean, if I write for that, I know that no matter what happens, I'll be able to get a great actress in that part. She might not be famous, but she'll be great.
Yeah.
I just want to circle back to when you're a lonely creep.
Yeah.
Between masturbation sessions, you're like, oh, here's the
Sleepwalkers detour happened because we were mixing an episode of Sleepwalkers over at the Sony stages. It used to be MGM, so that's cooler if it's MGM, But my sound supervisor shows me, hey, Parigi, look at this, and he shows me it was the Real Doll website. I didn't even know what it was at the time, but there are the pictures of the dolls, and they're attempting to display them in alluring or pornographic poses, right? So he shows me this just because he's looking for weird stuff on the internet. That's what the internet's for, and he shows it to me. And I see that picture, and I just flashed instantly to a research trip I had done to the LA County morgue. And, we're walking through, and there are all these dead bodies, and there is just an inertness to a human cadaver that you just can't fake. I mean, it's not like someone sleeping. It's just, more than anything else, it's like it reminds me of abandoned luggage, and these dolls, although they looked similar to, a woman in a cheesecake pose, it had that deadness to it.
I always swore that it was the skin because there's something, and I don't know the chemicals behind it, that happens to the skin after death where it becomes very dull and very textured, and it has no sheen to it anymore, and all the color's gone. Wow. And so it just becomes this very kind of monotone, and you can almost see the pores start. So it's got this weird texture, and the real dolls have that. It's like this latex flatness where it's all one color. It's just, that's what it always looks like to me. Yeah.
And well, that just totally registered. And honestly, the whole story just wrote itself. Like in not even 5 minutes, like maybe a minute. I'm just looking at this saying, what kind of person would buy this? And if they bought it, do they know that they're basically a necrophile? I mean, this is like mass market necrophilia, and so the whole story just kind of rolls out the sort of, not really so much the story as the kind of pathological logic of the thing kind of. And so I just sat down then and wrote it out. And so it came from that. It came from that site.
And then, like in the first couple of times that you made love to the doll that you were, did you experience it?
That's the movie. Stop.
I assume you did research.
No. The thing is, it's you see the dolls in person, and you can't get excited. I mean, it's like they're so, the amount of emotional, not emotional, but kind of almost psychotic disconnect from what is physically in the room to what imaginative space you need to live in order to, I don't know,
like a real detachment. That's why your character is able to detach the real people from this.
There's a documentary that I sound like I watched a lot of documentaries today. There's a documentary on the real doll culture that was on HBO it may have been like a decade ago when they were kind of at their peak. And now that I'm thinking about it, it may have been one of the Real Sex series. But I remember seeing it at like 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, and it goes through like 5 people who love real dolls and the reason that they love them.
Oh, there was one guy. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
It may have been a real sex episode, but I feel like it was a standalone thing because it was.
There was a guy who was in love with one. I remember.
Yeah, like he wanted to marry it, and there was a guy who had like 7 of them, and they were all in a room. Like he could have a board meeting of real dolls, but he changed their clothes every day. And there was one who took his doll swimming because I remember I was like, oh, they're waterproof.
But in their defense, at least you don't have to take them to the English patient. Put them on. I watched that last night, and I laughed out loud at that joke. I was like, at least you don't have to take them to the English patient. I was like, oh, Parigi hating on the English patient. Michael Ondaatje is not happy with you. And you did it twice in the movie.
Well, yes, of course. You
hit it where it hurts.
But that's a supremely perverse movie.
Which one?
English Patient. It's just that most of that perversity is kind of seen from it's more female perversity than male perversity. So that's an extremely kinked out, I
haven't seen it since the theater.
I've never seen it.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's worth seeing. It's worth seeing. Yeah. So that was kind of
But it was a big movie. I mean, for an indie, like there's that difference between like micro indie, which has the look because of 16. Yeah. But when I watched the behind the scenes, it's you had a real production.
See, but this is the difference. It's budget on that was $900,000. At the time that movie was made, and again, I'm always coming in at the end of the party, right? I wind up at the end of Famous Monsters, Right. And then when I get out here to make movies, I walk in the door at the end of basically the home video age, The business model was you'd make a movie for $1 million. You could sell worldwide rights for 1.2. So that meant like a 20% return on your investment, which was, which now again, it wasn't that cut and dried because the movie could fall apart or no one buys it. But that was the math. So you could improve your odds even more by shaving the budget. So they took instead of making mine for $1 million, I guess they gave another $100 million to the cooler or something, or $100,000 to the cooler. But anyway, so we do it for $900, and they knew they would probably make 1 or 1.2 off of it. Pretty good margins. That's how you get those people who are there. It's still a contained story. The story is as small and contained as anything that you would make now. Yeah. It just doesn't look like crap because you actually had a DP and
best next door neighbor of all time, Udo Kier. If Udo Kier is your neighbor, you got to move.
But he was the normal guy in the movie.
Yeah, kind of. He was like grabbing the woman.
But she's alive.
I don't know if that's like acting.
I think by casting Udo, you have not made him the most normal person.
Yeah, I was going to say, Udo ever the normal guy.
I love Udo.
No, but he is.
Rip Torn, who's even. What's funny about Rip Torn is in his later career, because of Men in Black, he's seen as this like businessman boss. But like everything before, he's like the most wild guy to ever be in Hollywood.
Have you seen that stuff online?
Norman Mailer?
Yes, him and Norman Mailer fighting. Yeah,
in a movie scene, directed by Mailer. Like he's actually trying to kill him for real because he pushed him too far. Mailer pushed him too far, and it's drugs and all that. It's just crazy. Wow. But Rip Torn was like the wild man, and so weird that later in his career he's like the boss guy, and I'm like, really? When did that?
Yeah, well, amazing. He still had some of that on set. I mean, it's like he would say, I used to be a sniper. I have my sniper eye, my killing eye. I don't want anyone in my line of sight. When I act, so we had to kind of keep people away because I don't know, he'd snipe them or something.
And a Dexter friend.
I was going to ask you about working with Desmond Harrington, which we've talked about off record, of course. Yeah. But I met him once or twice doing the Dexter podcast, and really great guy.
Yes, exactly.
Huge movie fan.
Yeah.
But like very like he's like, fuck it, I don't have an artsy movie. Goodfellas is my favorite movie of all time. He's like, I just love
Goodfellas is an artsy movie.
It's great. But no, what was he? I mean, what was the casting process like? I mean, did you have a lot of free reign in terms of who got to be in the movie, like people like it?
Yeah. See, and again, this is why I have such high praise for Ed Pressman. Mm-hmm. I mean,
he produced RoboCop, right?
No. No, you may think Ed Neumeyer.
Okay.
Ed Pressman's fan of The Paradise. All these other movies. Yeah. The Crow, all this kind of stuff. But content films, they had a casting director that they were using for their package of films. I'm trying to I'm blanking on the name, but she was tremendous. I mean, she's the one that brought in, the casting director, for the film, who was someone that Ed had brought on. And she's the one who brought on both Desmond and Melissa Sagemiller, who plays Lisa, and they were both just tremendous. I mean, just tremendous. But Ed let me cast whoever, Udo was someone I always wanted to work with ever since, Flesh for Frankenstein.
What was that meeting like when you first met him to tell him about your movie?
Well, it does not disappoint.
Good.
Udo's kind of offer only. He doesn't audition or anything like that, right? But you want to talk to him, you want to meet each other and see what's going on. So we meet at Fred 62 Cafe in like Los Feliz. He's
fish tacos.
Yeah, and he's read the script, and we go there to meet, and he says, "Yes, now Robert, I want my character to have like live rats, cages of live rats in his apartment,
like Klaus Kinski or something."
And he sings this song about the rats in the cellar, and he starts singing some German drinking song or something like that, And so, I'm thinking, well, Udo, I don't know if we can do the live rats, because, that's SPCA. You got to have handlers, all that kind of stuff. We're very tight schedule on this. I don't quite know if we can do the rats. But what if he's just watching movies of rats, like videos of rats on TV?
Oh my God.
And at that point, I'm sort of thinking, but then it's video playback and, So anyway, so he somehow he walked away from the idea of the rats. And we just had a great conversation. He's into art. He has an incredible collection and things like that. And he brought his own wardrobe for the film and brought some of his own art to be in his apartment and stuff like that.
I can't even imagine what an episode of Killer POV with Udo Kier would be. Like, I don't know what would happen. I feel like it would go off the rails. I think we should aim to try to do that in the lifetime.
Well, that's one thing. Every single script I write has a part for Udo.
Yeah,
every single thing. Because every day, first of all, he's a total professional, completely professional, always there, always knows his marks. And one of those actors, not only is he a great talent, but also a great technician. He always knows where to look and what to do and things like that. And he's just fun every day on set. The scene where he's walking to his apartment and he's carrying this box, and when he opens up, there's like a little figurine when he gets, but it's the hallway shot. And, these shoots are tough. we were shooting 6 days a week, and those are long days and all of that. But anyway, Udo's shooting that scene, and he's sort of walking through his blocking. He said, so I'm walking down the hallway, and I'm stroking my package. I'm stroking my package. And everyone's like laughing, and he's like, what are you laughing about? And all this. So it was, he's a great guy to have on set, and that every scene with Udo is going to be a good scene.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's just him talking on the phone or him doing this or him doing that. So it's like, great. That's like, if you can make an entire movie of great scenes, you've got a great movie. So if you just, okay, great. At least I know those parts are taken care of.
One of the problem with actors like that, I feel, is that they get relegated and get so used to being side support actors that you're just waiting for somebody to write the role for Udo, a role where he's a lead, kind of like The Wrestler was for Mickey Rourke, where they're on screen for every second. And what would that be like with Udo Kier on set? If somebody could write the right role for him, it could be. No, but that's so long ago. In the last 20 years.
Yeah.
It's like taking these people who are, Jeff Combs, it's a perfect, I always think about him wanting to write something where he's on screen for every second, but as a more serious character. I don't know. It's
that would be great.
I think Udo would be fascinating to watch in a more realistic kind of setting, but because he's so many different sides to a character like that.
Well, he's amazing in all the Lars von Trier movies.
Right.
In Melancholia.
I love him in Kingdom. Oh my God. Kingdom, it's just outrageous.
Well, you can't top an entrance like that.
He's the biggest baby I've ever seen. It's just like, oh my Lord. With the Desmond Harrington's character, going back to that, it feels like he literally could have been a character from, American Psycho. Like he's one of the friends around the table with the bed, but he hasn't got the confidence.
Well, he's not cool enough, though.
He's not cool, and he's got the look.
And he's working class. American Psycho, these are all the masters of the universe.
Right.
And these are just the grunts.
Yeah, it was like, why was he such an overachiever? Because he was always there, crack of dawn. He was that guy, right? He was trying to move up.
Because he had there's lots of reasons. You probably have a reason that you think, and that could definitely be it.
Right.
But another reason might be, on some level, he knows that he needs to fill his brain up with as much busy work as possible, so he just doesn't go
do
insane.
Something bad.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That makes sense.
And so that's kind of the deal. You sort of think certain things, when you're trying to write. A lot of it never shows up. And I'm not even saying this is what it is, because I hate when you fill in too much backstory. I mean, that was the problem with the Hellraiser movies. When you didn't know what Pinhead was, he was so much better. Then it's like, so what? He's a PTSD, like World War I vet? That's
on the internet?
That's space? That's not cool.
Yeah.
But I was sort of thinking, well, what might this guy have done before he wound up here? And I kind of imagine that maybe right out of high school, he winds up like in the Navy, and he's like on like a nuclear submarine someplace, some crazy contained, just look at this monitor for, your 12-hour shift kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then that musters out. And by then they sort of know, dude, we don't want this guy around nuclear weapons.
Right.
And then muster him out. And then he's got to get a job kind of thing.
And now back to Descartes.
Oh, yes.
Did you know, when did you see the Frankenstein story? Or was there any connections to Love Object? And we're going to let Rob talk about where the topic came from and say, what conversation did you have with, because this thing we had talked about before, but you mentioned it to me after a screening, I think.
We were at William Malone's house for a movie night. And we were just chit-chatting, and I was like, so what do you want to talk about when you come on the show? I was like, do you like Hammer movies? Do you want to talk Christopher Lee? And just, you came up with this idea of no, I think it'd be interesting to analyze the idea of man making woman through cinema. And I don't remember exactly what you pitched to me, everything from Frankenstein all the way to Ex-Machina is I think that's fascinating that there's all these stories where somebody's trying to make a woman, or that, and so initially my idea was all right, great, let's call this episode The Frankenstein Complex. But as soon as I mentioned that before we started, you immediately schooled me.
No, it's not schooling. No, it's just that, you see,
this is why I love talking to you, because you always have this amazing history behind.
Well, look, I think if you called this the Frankenstein complex, I think you're jumping into the story almost 2 generations later. Frankenstein is just the most recent iteration of this general kind of concept, a sort of poetic trope or something. I don't know what you want to call it. I've never really seen anyone try to define it, so I'll just call it the humanoid. Okay. Right?
Well, the Pygmalion story was one that had spawned a lot of loose.
What's that?
The idea of Pygmalion, of a man controlling a woman to make her in the image that he wanted.
No, you see, but it's more fascinating than that,
Galatea,
though. Yeah. Because, you see, look, you're absolutely right. Pygmalion is one of the first ones we have.
Right.
Right.
Can you define that better than me?
Here's what I think is fascinating about that. Here's what I would say. Here's why I'm so fascinated by the humanoid. I think that there are certain kind of basic philosophical questions or poetic ideas that define entire cultures. And I think the humanoid is one. And in Greek culture, the humanoid, that you have par excellence is Galatea. Now, what's that story? Okay. Pygmalion is a sculptor, and he creates a statue which is so incredibly beautiful and perfect and lifelike, he falls in love with it. And the gods are so amazed at his skill, they turn the statue into a real girl. And basically, they go off and live happily ever after. I may be wrong. Someone's going to correct me on this, but I don't think there's any sort of horrible, thing that like Medea and Jason or any of those kind of stories. So what I find fascinating about that is that embodies this entire concept, a very Greek concept that is, about pleasure, about the good life, and about human skill, human technology, being able to fulfill and satisfy human desire and create a good life.
Which is a direct connection to Ex-Machina. It's like you've just, besides the ending, not being as happy, you've literally described that technology.
Yeah.
Well, although before we get to Ex-Machina,
that's the end of it.
That's the end.
Most recent.
It's now filtered through, of course, our defining character, our defining humanoid is the Frankenstein monster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Before you get there, though, you have the Golem in Jewish culture. Mm-hmm. And the first Golem stories started to be told around 16th century, stuff like that, which is kind of fascinating because now you're in the Baroque period, which is all about synthesis and artificiality anyway. You know, you have pipe organs, which were like the synthesizers of the time. They can create any sound just by pushing keys. And you have the development of really elaborate theatrical machinery to duplicate the sound of thunder and the appearance of flames and all these kinds of things. So it's an age of fascinated with the synthetic creation or recreation of nature. And that's when you first get the stories about the Golem. Now, the Golem is much different than what we think of. Because, I mean, coming at it from a horror movie angle, you're thinking of Paul Wegener and those stories and all.
What's that Russian film, V or whatever?
No, that's not the Golem. The Golem is the Golem, which is the big clay monster that you put a message in his mouth. Am I remembering this one correctly? Yeah. And then he does as you say.
There's a different. Sometimes it's a magical formula on a scroll that goes in his mouth. In the movies, it's on the amulet. You know, and sometimes it's a written Hebrew word. I don't know what the word is, but it means life. But you wipe off one of the letters, and now it means death. And that's how you deactivate it, you know. But in the Golem stories, the Golem never runs amok. It's not like Frankenstein. It's not like you create this thing and now it runs amok. I mean, the early 16th century Golem stories, a rabbi makes this thing as an obedient robot who basically does a lot of farm labor, you know. And then, then it goes, he deactivates it and it goes away. And then you get into the stories of Rabbi Lowe and the Prague Ghetto. And the Golem is created to protect the Jews against the blood libel that was going on. And the typical Golem stories involving Rabbi Lowe's Golem is, like an evil Gentile will frame a Jew for a murder and throw the incriminating piece of evidence down a lake or down a well or something like that. And Rabbi Lowe summons the Golem, and the Golem does something physically impossible, like goes to the bottom of the lake or the well, or searches through an entire field of haystacks to find the thing that's needed to prove their innocence. And that's it. That's every freaking story.
Well, that's interesting, though, because it's for a purpose, a use, whereas Frankenstein is not for use. Frankenstein is to prove life. You're not getting Frankenstein to do something for you.
And also, I mean, with the Golem, you're right, absolutely right. It's for a purpose, but also a very specific kind of purpose. This idea of social justice, which is, a very fundamental kind of concept in, Jewish culture and things like that, So the Golem is kind of, it winds up kind of embodying this, very central theme or value of the culture. Now you get to Frankenstein, right? And you're right. Now it's coming out.
Do you think Mary Shelley was aware of those stories?
Probably.
I think that most of it came from the practice of galvanization, which was kind of like a sideshow act at the time period, where you would they would put corpses in town squares and electrocute them so that you could see the muscles kind of twitch around. And people thought that it was actually coming back to life briefly. So I think that hers was kind of an exacerbation of that.
But also, like, the original description of the monster's creation in the novel is more alchemical than surgical. And of course, with Kabbalism and all this kind of stuff, then if she was kind of reading about Paracelsus and alchemy, she would probably run across some sort of Golem stories just in some of that.
Me and Rob were reading about that last week. Paracelsus. Totally. But I wasn't sleeping with Lord Byron. So what are you going to do?
And so now you get to the Frankenstein monster, and it is the defining humanoid of our culture. We don't have a new one yet. And I think our culture won't significantly change until we do. And I don't know about chicken or egg. Sometimes the culture builds its consciousness through these creations, and sometimes, they're simply reflections of that.
What was so powerful about Frankenstein at the time, do you think, for people? Was it just a human creating life out of death, becoming a god ourselves?
Well, I think it was the idea that by the time Shelley's writing this in the early 19th century, Newtonian mechanics has created all sorts of things. There's this idea of the universe as totally knowable, and that humans just need to figure out these laws, and now we can do all the things that nature does. And at which point, now you start to ask this nagging question. Well, if it's just a great machine, is there a God? or not. Some people say, well, someone had to build the machine, but then it's kind of like, well, I don't know, And so, yeah, I think that's where it is. It becomes,
I love that every word out of your mouth could be about Ex-Machina. I love that. I mean, that's what's so amazing. Like everything you say, could be compared. They're almost like the greatest double feature.
Frankenstein, Ex-Machina.
Actually,
would be a great one.
Yeah.
Was Mary Shelley? Am I correct in this? Wasn't Mary Shelley like really young when she wrote? Like 19 or something like that.
Yeah.
No, I mean that's interesting because I know I love watching the commentaries on the Universal monster movies, and I can't remember who did the one for Frankenstein. It's probably Tom Weaver, one of those guys, but for a long time, the one line edited out of Frankenstein is him saying, "Now I think it's now I know how God feels." He makes a comparison of himself to God, and that was so at the time controversial.
Like 100 years after Shelley wrote it, it's that controversial.
That's right?
Yeah,
it is.
Well, I mean, I don't know if he actually says that line. I don't think
that's
something. I don't think that line is actually
there.
There's
definitely a Not that line might not be specifically said, but there's a lot of religious imagery in the book, kind of alluding to.
I gotta reread the book. I haven't read it in years.
Oh, the book is fascinating.
And I loved it, but I remember being like, my memory of it was it being very vague on how everything happened, including the actual
It's very
resurrection.
Descriptive of the lab, but what's actually going on?
Yeah,
not so
and
much.
I was like, okay.
Yeah. No, and again, I think it's fascinating that the Frankenstein monster keeps coming back at every sort of age of cinema. Mm-hmm. We need to keep revisiting that story, and I am waiting. We are ripe for the motion capture Frankenstein. To actually have a monster that looks like the one where it's kind of got the transparent yellow skin and all this kind of stuff. I mean, you can do that now with motion capture.
Well, we've got, it won't be motion capture, but Victor Frankenstein's coming up. I think it's releasing Thanksgiving.
Bernard Rose's?
It's, no, Max Landis wrote it.
Oh, well, there's also Bernard Rose has a new Frankenstein playing.
He made with Tony Todd. Tony Todd's in that one.
Yeah, and that's playing this weekend with 3 of his films. That, Paper House, and Candyman all in a row with Bernard Rose.
You see, the thing is, I wish they would actually do the novel because it falls into perfect 3-act structure.
Yeah, and I mean the bride story is all in the novel.
Yeah, and
but they don't continue with the woman in the novel, if I remember correctly. Well, he destroys her.
He destroys it because he realizes that if the monster has a mate, this superior race will take over the planet.
But have you guys read Patchwork Girl?
Yeah,
seriously, holy shit, you guys got to check it out. It is an online novel. It's like a hypertext where I think you have to read it online. I don't think it exists in any other thing, but it picks up as if the book exists as it is, but if at the end of writing the book, Mary Shelley decided that she wanted to go ahead and make that female Frankenstein, and she makes her. And they end up becoming lesbian lovers. And then, I kid you not, this sounds hilarious, but they end up becoming companions, Mary Shelley and her female Frankenstein. But the Frankenstein doesn't die, so it keeps living for another 175 years. And part of the story, then, it goes through the lives of the people that all of the body parts came from.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's really, really good.
And then Jeff Fahey is...
he's in it as
playing basketball.
Patchwork Girl.
Recently, Penny Dreadful's the best version of a straight play on Frankenstein's monster. I have you seen? You haven't seen that show, right?
I've sad to say I haven't. Yeah.
The second season, where it basically you have Frankenstein, the doctor. He creates a first being that is then destroyed by his first being, which is like his Frankenstein. And then later on, the Frankenstein forces him, says, "I'm going to rip you in parts if you don't make me a maid." And then there's this prostitute character who's been lurking around, and after she dies, they make her. She becomes way more empowered than you could ever believe, and you realize, oh no. Now we're all fucked because she realizes her power over men, and she's also intelligent, and she's got this kind of super strength, and that's where the new season's gonna kind of go into that. But great character, great actress who plays it, and you're just like, oh, this is a really fun play. That show's my real surprise the last couple of years. I think someone like you would definitely find really interesting because it's really great to the period.
I definitely want to see it.
I want to check it out too. I want to catch up on that.
And then after Frankenstein, what do you think? Like, do you think we haven't yet had that next reincarnation? Because I feel like Ex-Machina, in terms of that, there's a lot of movies we're going to talk about in a second, but that's the closest to a modern
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we had like Splice, which was kind of more of a scientific element.
Yeah.
Which is of the time, but there's something about Ex-Machina, which is like it's almost like, what if the Facebook guy took all his money and disappeared for a while and invented something?
Yeah.
And this genius, but it's something that he doesn't really know. You don't know what he wants from it.
I think you're all overlooking the genius that is Frankenhooker, quite frankly.
But again,
Want a party?
Weird science.
Weird science kicks ass.
You see, Frankenhooker is amazing because you kind of have Pygmalion combined with Frankenstein. But in doing that, you kind of see, where we as a culture kind of our differences to the Greek culture. Pygmalion creates Galatea. They now live happily ever after, right?
Oh, so the guy carving it is Pygmalion.
Yeah.
They always say Pygmalion's story, so I always think the thing is Pygmalion, but the thing is Galatea. Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But whereas in Frankenhooker, what happens with Frankenstein, the difference between Frankenstein and, Pygmalion is his creation is cursed. So there's this concept of original sin, which, in the original novel doesn't have anything to do with, bad brains or anything like that. But it's such an important concept. They had to make it clear in the movie version.
Maybe it's because he didn't ask for permission from the gods. He usurped the gods to create his own thing. Whereas Pygmalion had to get that permission.
Well, there's this kind of, there is this sort of vindictive nature of, this sort of sex negative or pleasure negative aspect of the Christian world as opposed to the sort of very, pleasure positive aspect of the Greek world.
I would disagree with that to a certain extent, because just as much as we see these kind of pleasurable creations made in Greek mythology, we see just as many inadvertent made female monsters. Like, I don't even remember the name of this creature, but I remember that Zeus fell in love with her and he gave her the power to take her own eyes out. But then later he started sleeping around with all these other women and she turned into a monster. And so we see that a lot in Greek mythology.
But I would say that she's not a humanoid, though. You're right. It's definitely, changes that have been sort of worked, but she's not made from scratch.
Okay. So
she's also not made by a person.
Okay, because I would also say like Lilith falls into that, who didn't submit, and therefore she inadvertently turned into a monster.
Right. Well, I would say that the humanoid is specifically made by a person.
Okay, it's got to be a man.
Made by no, it doesn't have to be made by a man. It could be made by a woman. But it's made artificially by a human. Okay, it's a human made by a human without the natural means.
You've been listening to KC12 Greek mythology. Your classics all day long. Next up, pottery.
Back to Frankenhooker.
Frankenhooker, exactly.
What a date.
I love
Frankenhooker. Well, one of the first, though, like 1935, Call Freund, Mad Love is the first one to kind of literally do. It's trying to, as literally as possible, because her name's even Galatea. That was my first.
Well, he calls her. That's not her real name.
That's not her name. So it's Gogol, Dr. Gogol.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Metropolis in forever, but
Metropolis definitely.
Yeah, that's humanoid.
Well, yeah. I mean, now that's kind of fascinating.
Wait. Before we go on to that, let's define. Is there a difference between humanoid? Because a lot of the movies I was writing initially were humanoid, and then I started writing a lot that are android and are like literally robotic. And is there a difference, or is it all in the?
Well, I would say that most of our I think what you're calling android movies, robots, just straight up robots, they're still living in the shadow of Frankenstein.
Right.
There are very few, although,
Stepford Wives.
Yeah.
Ex-Machina. They're the ones I was...
They're living in this... Although it's interesting, though, if you use now the concept of the other cultural humanoids we have to look at, ones that we've created. Well, like, for example, the Golem. Big Hero 6 is definitely in the Golem tradition. Yeah, totally. He's created for a sort of life-affirming purpose and never deviates from that, which is sort of weird. I didn't get upset. There was no emotion for me at the end when he gets killed because it's just like a tool that breaks.
I never saw it.
Well, don't worry. He kind of comes out.
But like Stepford Wives, right?
Yeah.
Well, they're golems. They're a weird kind of golem.
Super creepy. I love that. But Westworld as well. In Westworld, they're created purely for pleasure or activity.
I'm so excited about that new TV show.
The new show will be good too. But the original movie, if you haven't seen it, it's a great movie. Like, it's a really well-made movie. But like, it's really creepy. There's something about these guys going. At first, you're on their side. Yeah, we're going to go and we're going to have sex with some prostitutes in the West. Yeah. You're like, oh, this is cool. And then at a certain point, when it turns on you, you start going, oh, this is really icky and weird. And like, they kind of deserve it. You know, it's I don't know.
Well, but you wonder. I mean, you know, and just think how. I mean, if you actually had Westworld. Yeah. So now you're having interactions with things that are humanoid, you know, and are programmed with all sorts of human responses, you know, but you've totally removed from yourself any kind of moral inhibition. You know, what are those interactions going to be like? And then, you know, sort of more significantly, when you walk away, are you now changed or not? You know, and maybe you won't be. Maybe it would just be like playing a video game. I mean, you run amok on Grand Theft Auto and, you know, no one runs, you know, because of that goes out and runs amok.
Right. If you didn't think you were hurting a human, would you be willing to do, what would the human be willing to do to that?
And that
being? And that's the kind of disturbing question.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah. I feel like the main guy in Ex-Machina, not the lead character, but the guy who created her, it's cut from that cloth. Yeah. He doesn't see them as humans, so he can do whatever he wants.
Oh, yeah.
But when you watch it, you can't help but feel that they're human quality. You know, and so we're on the side of the protagonist who is falling in love with one, and so it's a fascinating.
Well, that's this fascinating, uncanny aspect to you know, not just the humanoid, but just to dolls and mannequins and things. You know, because they remind us on the one hand, you know, the opaqueness of other people.
Did you come across this term? So researching the show, I found a term after looking up all these movies called the Uncanny Valley.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I hadn't heard of this before, but the idea is basically it's a hypothesis in aesthetics that says, which holds that the features look and move almost, but not exactly like natural beings, and it causes a response of revulsion from a person or an observer. And the valley, the dip, is like when they kind of quantified, people are finding it real, it's real, and then it just dips when there's a slight thing that's not human.
And in the dictionary, the picture next to Uncanny Valley in the dictionary is Polar Express.
Oh yeah, because you don't feel comfortable watching these almost human animation. They're too close to human, but not close enough to the fun animation. Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's a weird thing. Whereas Ex-Machina, I didn't feel that. Like when I looked at her, I didn't feel that. But I feel that in a lot of movies about this. I understood what that.
Well, of course, in Ex-Machina, it's a real actress's face.
Right.
Yeah. You know, so it
is real. Yeah.
You know, even though they're doing a lot of CGI replacement for this stuff, the part that you're looking at, you know, is totally real.
Yeah, I just felt bad for Andrew Niccol the whole time because that movie Simone. This was like the good version of that movie. Like, Simone just doesn't work. It's one of those movies that just the idea is probably interesting, but oh man, it's just trying to create the woman on the internet and Al Pacino. You know, just
it's sort of like a rehash of Max Headroom.
Yeah.
You know, but not as daffy.
Yeah. What
are some other titles that you were looking
at? Were there other titles that you were thinking about when you were creating Love Object, or did Love Object just come from that story and then you know, it
really just came from that experience of seeing the Real Doll website. But then once I started down that path, it was really much more inspired by like late 19th, early 20th century sort of French frenetic literature, this whole genre of stuff. Kind of the same territory as the Grand Guignol, that just dwelled on ideas of like obsession and perversion and things like that. There was a great book written called Idols of Perversity, about the femme fatale in like 19th century fiction and things like that. And this idea that, you know, this it's really a projection of male sexual anxiety. And which is what, I mean, that's all Love Object is, you know. And so, you know, the whole, I also started thinking about movies like Repulsion, which, you know, I totally love Repulsion, but this idea of, you know, look, she's this deranged virgin, you know, and this kind of thing. It's like, and the movie's made by a guy. Now, I don't subscribe to these extremely limited hermeneutics we have now where you have to fit into a certain demographic to say or do certain things.
Tell a story. Yeah.
But it was like, you know, okay, that's interesting. That's a great movie about sort of female sexual insanity, but you know, what's the male version of that story? And then also a lot of thinking, because, you know, I did another one of the TV shows I was producing was Profiler. And so I did a lot of research on serial killers, and I was working on that. I noticed this very peculiar sex-typed difference between male and female serial killers. Female serial killers, all of their murders seem to be a kind of perversion of nurturing roles, or nurturing instincts. You can either take nature or nurture, whichever one you want. I don't care. But like nurses who kill patients, or
Eileen Werles kind of became a big mother lover, sister kind of role.
Yeah, or like also like foster homes where they kill either elderly people or foster kids or these kinds of things, or even wives that serially kill husbands or kill their families. So it's all a kind of like a dark, toxic mutation of the roles of nurturing, caregiving, things like that. Male serial killers, their pattern is almost always essentially a perversion of seduction. Yeah. They go through this kind of like, life's or not sort of a killing cycle that starts off with trawling and then looking and all this kind of stuff until they commit the murder, and then they have like the trophies that they keep, and there's a sort of trough and valley kind of thing going on.
Often it feels like they're replaying a time of sexual humiliation or something that had happened one way in their mind, didn't happen that way, and then they're almost trying to reclaim their masculinity.
But as you point out with that, it's all tied basically into sex.
Yeah.
Right.
But then most of these stories we're talking about, Westworld, it's so they control a woman, they can have sex with them, don't have to worry about performance anxiety or anything like that. It's just about their pleasure. It's not a reciprocal affair. It's just, we create a woman, so now it's ours.
Right.
We own it, and we can do what we want to it. It's very different than
but this is also
real ladies.
But
much more complicated.
You see, but this idea is so intriguing that it also, gets flipped. I mean, you have like Lady Frankenstein, where, she creates, a monster to satisfy her own desires,
May blew me away. Yeah. I only saw it a few months ago for the first time. I just had never seen it. It's exactly what we're talking about. But the flip side, and yet you're right again about the sexual thing. It's less sexual for her. It's more about this best friend almost.
We see that's
the
why
part she likes.
Again, that was something that I thought in real life was very weird. So you've got these dolls, okay, and guys are buying them in real life to basically have sex with them, right? What was meanwhile, at the same time as that was going on, I had read about women who were buying inflatable men to put in the car next to them when they were driving so that they would not seem to be unaccompanied or alone or vulnerable.
They could get in the HOV lane.
Oh, well, I thought, but it was also about security. Oh. So one humanoid was
about sexuality.
Yeah. And I thought that was kind of a very interesting sort of difference, and I thought, wow, it's I don't know, what is that?
But how do you explain dildos?
Well,
that's a different show.
That's a whole nother discussion.
Well, at one point I actually had a scene at the end of Love Object where, spoiler if you haven't seen it, but I noticed it's on YouTube now, so anyone
it's not
can
Netflix streaming anymore. I remember a few years ago it was.
Now
I had to get on DVD.
Someone loaded it to YouTube or something.
I was curious. It's kind of hard to get. Where's the rights at this moment?
Well, I mean, Content Films owns it. Lionsgate owns the home video, so I guess it's
that
really
explains a lot.
Did it do well?
It did great.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And it's like, I even had a gonzo idea for a sequel. It would have been really bizarre. But honestly though, the economics change, basically wiped out by digital piracy. So suddenly doing those movies at that rate, it no longer made sense as a business model. And it is directly and singly attributed to digital piracy. So
you stand firm on piracy.
Yes. Well, I don't know what you mean stand firm.
Well, stand firm that it's destructive to the industry.
Oh, yes, without doubt.
I'm always fascinated by the ones like, what's her name online? Lexi Alexander.
I don't want to talk about her.
No, but just the idea of trying to justify, like, things that are out of print. You're getting some old movie and you burn it. Who cares? Like, it's not affecting anyone.
Or I always say,
really
like, I'm against bootlegging, or I overlook it if the film is not available in any other format. You can't see it. If the only way that you can see it is a bootleg copy.
Well, if it's literally not hurting anybody, which is that scenario, but if Expendables is coming out and you're like, fuck that movie, I'm just going to download it, and there's a reciprocal effect. There's a ripple that's going out.
Expendables is an interesting case because this was something that was really primarily wiping out movies in that 2 to 5 range, right? But now you see with Expendables, it's impacting movies in that 10 to 20, 25 range, So it's terrible. I mean, and the thing that gets me the most about it, my pet peeve on this, I'm just going to vent for a moment.
Do it.
I hate it. I hate it when people who are all into piracy and they have this sort of self-glamorizing illusion that they're sticking it to the man, right? The man is not hurt by this. The huge studios, the big corporations, things like that, they are not hurt by this at all. I guarantee you, you could put Avengers 2 out online, steal it, like a week before, and everyone's still going to go see it in the theaters. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The people this wipes out are independent creators. That's who it wipes out. So you're not sticking it to the man, you're sticking it to the little guy. And then these same people, these sort of internet utopians are the first to whine and complain about where's the diversity in voices and this and that. Well, you wipe them out by making it so that now they can't make a movie. Take fill in the blank, whatever diverse group you want to pick, right? There's some filmmaker there who has saved up money, maybe out of 10 years of working, at McDonald's or something. He or she is ready to make their movie, In the past, they could have taken the roll of that dice and they might have gotten the money back. And now they can make movie number 2 and number 3, number 4, and they can go on, At least it was up to the marketplace, the viewers, this kind of thing. But when you just steal that movie from them, well, okay, now they're back to square one. Mm-hmm. Now they have to work for another 10 years or whatever to get enough money to try to make something.
Is there any solution to it? I mean, is it just like you'd have to actually, the cops would have to follow through with?
No, there's a very simple solution. Eliminate net neutrality. Just eliminate it. And I know, and everyone says,
that's Lloyd Kaufman's big platform, right? Lloyd Kaufman's
he's against, I think.
He's against net neutrality.
Yeah. I think.
See, I don't. See, here's my.
I believe that's his big.
Usually, the fashionable thing is for everyone to say you have to have net neutrality because it would be so evil if you took it away. What would happen is that all the big telecom companies, all these big multinationals, they would now monopolize the the traffic, and they would charge high rates. They would charge a lot of money to have fast traffic. Mm-hmm. And then all the other traffic is condemned to really slow transmissions. And I absolutely right. That is correct. And it's a good thing because with that one move, you've wiped out pirates. They don't have any money to buy the high speed traffic. So you've wiped them out. So if you really look, if you're so desperate to see Frankenhooker that you're going to steal it, fine. You load it up, some pirate site, they're on a low traffic lane, and it might take you a day to download the damn thing, right? Meanwhile, it's over here on one of the, evil corporations' websites that's paying for high-speed traffic, and you download it for, $2, $3, $4, $5, whatever it's going to cost. Mm-hmm. Catalog title like that might be $1. But still, that $1, enough people are doing it. And now Frank Henenlotter actually gets to make another movie.
Basket case 4, bitches.
Yeah, it's like, if the choice is between some Cheeto-eating cellar dweller getting movies for free and me getting a chance to see another Frank Henenlotter movie, I want to see the next Frank Henenlotter movie. Yeah. And I think it's the best thing that happen. You wipe it out. And so, yes, you have exactly that kind of stratification that they fear. I say it's a good thing. And then what happens is, well, then, someone like you guys put together, a company to buy a lane of traffic for horror films, and now because you have that lane, that sort of regulated lane, now, you're making money off of that, and now you guys start producing your own movies. And now there's an original Killer POV line of films.
Us making money?
What?
Yeah. No, but that's how it works. But see, so, if you eliminate net neutrality, you actually solve the problem of digital piracy. Not 100%, but enough to make it economically viable to make movies again for independent creators.
Yeah.
But,
What has to happen to make that happen, though? It has to go through Congress, right?
It's like a huge hot button issue
see,
right now.
See, but here's the thing that frustrates me about it. This had come up for a vote like last year or something like that. Something was going to be, they were making a decision on this. And, and like you have these pundits like John Oliver, and I watched his piece on net neutrality. And he just made a joke of the whole thing about how you have to have net neutrality. And, he drops, some jokes about Lex Luthor and Superman and makes some trite jokes about cat videos. And he yells at you with an English accent. And suddenly everyone just does everything he says. and they got like 1 million phone-ins or emails or something by people saying, save net neutrality. And it's like, but there's no real reasoning behind it. It's just a pose. It's just fashion. And the consequence is that it destroys independent film.
Well, in terms of film, I can understand the point that you're making. I'm not speaking from any sort of knowledge because I don't understand the rules of net neutrality and what would be enforced. But as somebody that created a site out of nowhere, Icons of Fright, just to do something I love and get a voice out there, the thing that scares me is the idea of somebody policing that and telling me that I can't do that or I have to pay for that right.
But that's not how it would work, though. I mean, basically all it would mean, you could still create that site. And a site like that, where you're not streaming large chunks of media, would probably not be affected by the lower bandwidths, the lower transmission speeds that you would have. So you can still do that. This doesn't affect political discourse because meaningful political discourse is low bandwidth traffic. You're talking about, written stuff, text, things like that. Yeah,
it is. What's funny is really at its core, it's the problem. It's again, kind of like your story. It's the disconnect between thinking the internet's not part of our real world, and it is. Yeah, and so to think that pornography, like you could watch pornography on the internet where something terrible happens, maybe somebody is raped or something, and be like, oh, but that's not real because it's just pornography on the internet. It's like, nope, that happened to a real person and that's a real act. So I feel like it would be like robbing somebody on the street for $25,000, like stealing their movie that they spent $25,000 on.
That's
you
exactly
just fleece them with a knife. And so it's the same thing, but our minds don't think of it that way. Most of us just think of it as this free thing that we want to stay free. And that's our mentality. It's like, well, it's this. And I have that too, in a sense.
It's been the Wild West for a long stretch.
Exactly,
I mean, even if
time.
you think from the publishing world, Rob running websites and even, the stuff we've done over at Fango, when it comes to acquiring pictures now, Google image, copy and paste. Nary a thought about where that photo's come from or who owns the rights or anything like that. And so you actually, I know a lot of people who have gotten into trouble for just Google image, first image of Frank Henenlotter that pops up. That's the one I'm going to use. Yeah. Oh shit, there's a letter or cease and desist. I now owe them $5,000 for publishing that photo. Because you don't even make the association on the internet.
It's a complicated issue. We're not going to solve it here, but it is. It's interesting to hear because I have never really heard that side of it.
Neither have I, yeah.
And I think the
thing is, it's starting now to affect physical media. There's an artist whose work I follow because I really like it, a guy named Jeff Zarnow, goes under the name.
I love Jeff Zarnow. He does all the Fright Rag shirts.
Yeah, exactly. Well, did you see, notice recently he mentioned on Facebook where someone's been stealing his designs and there's some sort of internet cafe press kind of thing.
Yeah, I know the one, cafe press.
But this is a different one. This is one that specializes in T-shirts or something. And they were stealing his designs that he had made for another company and were selling them as T-shirts on their site. And then he sends them a cease and desist letter, and they say, prove that it's yours. And he says, my name is right there written in the design. And so they just, it's just a delaying tactic, and they sell 20 more T-shirts or whatever. Ugh. So, and I've seen that kind of basic story that my art has been stolen. My art that I made specifically for a T-shirt has been stolen by this particular whatever site. I forget its name. And they're printing it and selling copies of it. Wow. So again, these are art. These are people who, look, if you take away all the money Jeff makes on his artwork, I don't know, he's going to have to work in a McDonald's or something. And how many more great pieces of art are we going to get from him?
You know what I love? That some people listening will think there's a disconnect with what you're talking about, but there isn't. You're talking about reproduction.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Frankenstein's reproduction of humanity. Reproduction of people is not much different than the artistic reproduction or the dollar bill.
Well, yeah.
Case or, I connected it all back.
Brought it back.
There you go.
I did.
There you go.
I will actually harken back to something that you brought up that it's definitely an interesting psychological study. If you look at the sex toys chosen by male and females, male sex toys tend to replicate the female. They look like them. The real doll, even those like fake vaginas that you can get.
I know where you're going.
Now
with
think
this.
about
where fake vaginas where? just cut the show and give me a link.
If you think about kind of your standard vibrator, it does not look like a man.
Yeah, and it's interesting.
It's
and the
one part of them,
and they do make things that look like it, but you never see them as top sellers. It seems like something that's kind of weird.
That's just what you use in porns.
Yeah,
I don't. Maybe it has to do with the higher priority of the visual in male sexuality, perhaps.
I don't know.
Maybe
there's something psychological going on there that I haven't quite figured out.
The thing that always surprises me about that is that the sizes are so remarkably different. There's like very small things, and then these, and I'm like, what is going on here? There's a lot I don't understand.
Well,
I'm not going to lie.
I will tell you something.
I don't even remember who said it, but I heard a quote once that the female vagina points inward, and therefore females introspect, and the penis points out, and guys just knock things over with it. And that kind of just sums up sexuality for me.
It's pretty simple, really. Let's go through some other titles. I mean, obviously, how did you feel when you will probably saw this in theaters? Maybe Bride of Frankenstein, Bride of Re-Animator.
I mean, well, you know. I like Bride of... Look, it's... Re-Animator's a classic. I love Re-Animator. Bride of Re-Animator kind of gets a little bit off track, you know? I do like it. It's got some great stuff in it, but...
Great effects, but a little clunky.
We'll just story-wise...
It's the clunkiness. He admits it. He says he's clunky.
And of course, and I got to say, man, by the time you get to Beyond Re-Animator, at that point, I'm actually angry.
Oh, yeah, that movie didn't work for me at all.
But for a very specific reason. It violates, I think, the fundamental source of the horror and fascination of Re-Animator, which is the mechanistic aspect of life. You know, Beyond Re-Animator is all about, look, I've trapped the soul. You know, it's basically ripped off from,
Tales from Crypt.
That Frankenstein, Hammer Frankenstein. I can't remember.
But also Tales from Crypt had the thing about the soul from the spine. I always loved that one.
Yeah.
But it's like, look, once you have a soul, the world's not scary. You know, there's this glowing light optical thing that, is all nice and everything. No, Re-Animator is terrifying because, what is the difference between the reanimated and us? It's just a chemical process. But, there's just that couple of molecules off that make them like go insane or be whatever they are.
That's what they never explored, actually. When I think about it, they never did one where it worked. Like flawlessly. Like they brought someone back who's thinking and being. Like it would have been cool if you refined the serum and got one right for a while.
Yeah.
So like it works for most of the movie and then it starts to, and you're like, oh shit.
Well, speaking of Re-Animators that never happened, I was pitching a sequel to Usenet at one point.
Oh. Hey, let's hear this.
Another man who sometimes wears a fine mustache.
Yes.
Yourself.
It's going to be House of Re-Animator, right?
Oh, is this the president one?
Yeah.
No. This was a different one, right? So this idea was basically going to be, because I had mentioned it, there needs to be another Re-Animator movie. Saying, kids don't know Re-Animator. Jeffrey's like, an adult now. He's not like the young scientist kid. Mm-hmm. You can't make that movie. It'd have to be a remake. And I said, no. This is what you do. So the idea is you have some new young characters who have been researching the Miskatonic Morgue Massacre, right? And they go to the asylum where Herbert West is an inmate to kind of like, get the real scoop, right? And when they go there, they go and they meet Herbert West, but he's just all drooling, straitjacket, just, kind of stuff, right? And then what you find out is that that's not Herbert West. Herbert West is the director of the asylum. He's taken his place. That's the reanimated body. That's the reanimated body of the director, and he's now using all the parts of the inmates to continue his experiment.
Great. That's so fun.
And I thought, dude, that'd be great. That's
the only hard part about that is the second you see him. Like the second we see that person, we know he's not Herbert West. So you need the kids wouldn't, but we would. So you'd have to find a good reveal.
Who's to say you see him? It's not like he welcomes them at the door and everything like that.
Right.
It's
so
just
he's like the reclusive guy up in his office.
When that director turns around, director, there's something wrong in Ward B, and he turns around, it's Jeffrey Combs. It's like,
holy shit,
I mean, it would have been.
That's really fun.
It would have been awesome.
House of Re-Animator. That's what it was.
Yeah, I was just sort of thinking like House of Frankenstein, or it's got kind of a Caligari spin to it, maybe call it Cabinet of Re-Animator. I don't know, but
some of the there's some crap ones in here. I mean, I really like Stepford Wives. She hit on Metropolis being very close to Ex-Machina as well. But then there's ones like Deadly Friend. I
love Deadly Friend.
Yeah, the basketball scene.
But we're bringing it back out of again. That's actually quite an emotional reason to turn her into what she becomes in that film.
Yeah, I mean, it's I still have to read the original novel Friend. I think it's by Diana. Oh, fuck, I'm forgetting the name, but I hear it because I hear in the novel it's a lot. The characters are a lot younger.
Oh.
But I mean, that's the thing. It's like you take. I'm very sensitive to childhood stories, things like Stand By Me or whatever.
Right.
So like if you could think of that idea of like you have a friend, a female friend at 12 years old or whatever it is that dies, and it's like, how do you deal with that? And it's like you have this compulsion to bring them back, especially for like, you're brilliant.
It's a more emotional reason.
Yeah, I mean, the movie's not exactly like that. I still love it for different reasons, but...
Well, one that echoes that, but at an older age, is Dr. Phibes, because the woman he's with in the film is obviously a construction android that to replace his wife.
I don't know. What is Volnavia?
I thought at some point they do show
No, we
her
never
workings.
see.
You never see her working?
And when the acid falls on her, she screams.
Yeah. Interesting.
I really felt she was a humanoid, but it's definitely implied.
It's who knows. I mean, that's what I love. Again, that's one thing I love. In the 70s, 80s, stuff like that, 90s, you didn't have to explain everything.
Yeah.
And it gives you a room for emotional and imaginative engagement in the movies, and you can just be sitting, you can watch that whole movie wondering what's Volnavia's deal.
Yeah.
There's probably Volnavia fan fiction out there someplace.
Yeah. She's ridiculously cute. And then there's some movies that do it without creating an actual humanoid. Pretty much my favorite film of all time, Vertigo, is really about shaping a human to take a role. And I think those movies sometimes are actually more interesting because it's very dark.
And what's very interesting in this regard is Polanski's The Tenant.
Yeah. Where he becomes.
And it's like just the collective need in that apartment to recreate that victim,
and he becomes that victim.
But what's interesting is almost a parallel to voodoo ceremonies in this, because like when in real life voodoo ceremonies, there's different people will get possessed by the Lao, the voodoo gods and things like this, and there's a kind of almost a kind of performance expectation within the group, so whoever gets possessed by the Lao, I mean, look, you could just say it's a supernatural thing, walk away from it, but other explanations that there's an idea that there's a performance expectation. Baron Samedi acts this way, so if that's that. You rarely have two Baron Samedis happen in the same ceremony where they say, "No, I'm Baron Samedi." I don't think that really happens. But there's a kind of group shaping of behavior in a very specific way that happens in the voodoo ceremonies, which I think is kind of fascinating. I always sort of thought about that when I was watching The Tenant. But
there's also, and then just the last one I had was there's a movie Taxidermy where he's creating an object out of himself,
which is the most disturbing movie I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's like multiple storylines, but by the end, it's a taxidermist who finds a way to actually taxidermy himself. So by the end, when he expires, he will be perfectly preserved as an object. And I just found that to be it's always like the height of these things, like creating yourself to become the object.
Of course, Phibes was there first. He embalms himself at the end. But there was that Japanese artist in the I think early 20th century who sculpted a perfect duplicate of himself out of wood. He was dying, and he made this so his lover would remember him. And it's in the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum, and it's he made a sculpture of himself. It's like insanely. I think the rumor is he actually pulled out his own fingernails and teeth and things like that and put them inside this sculpture.
Wow.
But what's fascinating is in terms of this idea of the existing people being modified for different purposes. You got that whole genre.
Yeah, that's a subgenre.
I mean, you were talking about, like Stepford Wives and things like that. We've gotten to the point now, there was that Almodovar movie, the Pedro Almodovar movie. Where
The Skin I Live In?
Yeah, where it actually turns a guy into a woman.
It's an amazing twist.
And then Human Centipede, of course, with its iterations.
Yeah, body modification is a very different genre.
It all goes back to
Yes.
With 7 S's.
The movie's so scary, you can't say it. You hiss it. Yeah.
Slowly turning your assistant into a snake. It's brilliant.
I love that. How is that supposed to save humanity? He's he wants to protect humanity. He wants to save humanity from the impending nuclear war and fallout. So he's just going to turn them all into king cobras.
Because if we're all cobras, we're going to make it through the nuclear war.
I guess. Yeah. They didn't think that one out too much.
Told you he was smart.
But but of course you also had things like Tusk, which is kind of bizarre because again it's now whatever the desire is, it's disconnected from the mechanics or the needs of sex or procreation or anything like that. It's now just free floating desire that's just making its own
Actually, before all of this, a funny one to end on is Mars Attacks. They put, Pierce Brosnan's head on a little dog and Sarah Jessica Parker on a little something else. And it's just like this weird...
Lisa Marie's like this weird, this...
Oh, yeah. I love her in that.
Perfect woman.
Yeah, she's a perfect woman.
Alien disguise, whatever.
But it's just interesting because it's always like, if you could, hey, why not? If you can do it, if the science is there, let's fucking do it, It's interesting. But I'm glad
you've seen those pictures of like the Russian experiments where they had the two-headed dog and things like that.
Yeah.
So
there's some dark stuff.
That was kind of reminding me of that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Well, there's some guy in Russia who claims he's going to have a head transplant. They're going to try and transplant his head onto another body. He's got some terminal disease, so his body is all like atrophy. And
once
stuff.
The brain
freaking
is detached,
Russian, man.
It's
Russia.
Well, we'll see. Maybe it's not all over. Maybe Sean Bean can come back in Game of Thrones season 1. Spoiler, fuck you all. He got a head transplant.
See what happens. I don't know.
There was a movie from, it was like Total Exploitation, where it was like this ultimate white racist, and he started...
Thing with two heads.
Yeah, we got the two heads.
Yeah.
That's a wild movie. Yeah. Anything we should be... What are you working on right now? You're back on S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Yeah, back on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 3. Uh-huh. So we just started that. I mean, we start airing towards the end of September.
Does that give you time to still chase like your own scripts?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I spent the hiatus working on a project for Bulgarian TV.
Yeah, I read in that jump cut on Saturday.
That was great.
with at least one former guest who's been on the show I can think of.
Yeah. So we're the Bulgarians are coming over in September to pitch that around. So I hope that goes. It would be completely fun. Obviously, because of NDAs and stuff, I can't really say much about that. But it's like just tonally. My sort of touchstones on the project were demons, Fulci, like Della Morte Dell'Amore, Michele Soave, Lamberto Bava, that whole sort of like late 80s, early 90s Italian horror. That was kind of like the sort of tonal, emotional, stylistic touchstone. So if it goes... it'll be pretty mondo.
And are you pitching it as a series or?
Yeah, it's a series thing.
Yeah, you guys have already written the first few, right?
Yeah. And then there's another project I'm working on with one of the producers I met when I was working. Actually, the producer who hooked me up with the Marilyn Manson project, Neil Edelstein. He did the remake of Ring, the American remake of Ring. It's a TV series that's like I took all of the weird esoteric stuff that I'm interested in and made a box that was perfectly shaped to hold it all, and that's this TV series called Weird Detective.
Oh, cool.
And so, we're sort of working on that because, TV is where all the action is now because it's not impacted by the piracy because, Netflix gets your money every month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, the piracy on something like Game of Thrones, of course, is so huge, it's starting to impact HBO, but they're obviously still doing it years later with that degree of piracy. That shows how sturdy that model is, the subscription model. So, and serialized stuff works better there, So working on those things, a new script, a couple of new scripts. One of them is a children's film. I wanted to make my own Halloween children's film, which would be really fun, really kind of, it's like Nightmare Before Christmas kind of children's film,
Well, if you do Weird Detective.
Weird Detective.
Well, you need Bill Malone to come and do one.
Well, no, it's a show I co-created with him.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It makes me so happy because
he
does, even though that Kickstarter didn't work, he deserves good things.
Yeah. I mean, see, that's why I'm so annoying and strident about digital piracy is that it means that people like Bill don't get to make more movies. Yeah. He's going to make another movie. I guarantee you he will because he's a genius. He's going to make another movie. But he would be making a lot more. There would be more of those movies for us to enjoy.
Yeah. Same with Stuart Gordon, who also came on here and didn't reach his Kickstarter goal. It's it's a shame.
That's a crime.
Yeah, it's a crime that Stuart Gordon hasn't made a film in God knows.
Well, but of Nevermore. I mean, did you guys saw that?
Amazing.
Yeah. It is best productions I've ever seen live.
Yeah. The thing that astonished me about that is not only just the performance and everything like that, but Jeffrey Combs performing the bells.
Yeah.
opened up that poem for me in a way it never had before.
Yeah, I never understood that because I was like, all he's saying is bells. It's been like 25 repetitions of bells. And
exactly.
It makes no sense. I mean,
didn't
like, you
get
just
it.
assume that they're driving him crazy, but you just
sort of scan
like,
through
this
it.
is really kind of boring. But yeah, the delivery of it was...
It's like I finally got that poem, you know? It's like after I don't know how many years. And it's like, now that's genius right there.
Yeah, I can't count the times I've said, man, it's like you've never seen Jeffrey Combs act until you've seen this.
Yeah,
you've seen him play movie characters that are fun, but this is like this weird other level.
I saw Nevermore at least 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, that's
like I went back and back and back every time. And again, it's like you're seeing a play or performance like that. It pretty much stays on script, but I mean, there are moments on certain nights, like Jeffrey gets very emotional as Poe, and he gets in the audience, and like he'll be looking at a guy, and the guy like sneezes. He's like, "Are you all right, sir?" And like those little moments where he's as Poe interacting with the audience.
Well, I had a pitch that I wanted to do for that movie. The way I want, if I had all the money in the world, and I'd just give it to Jeffrey and Stuart to do it, but the way I'd love to see Nevermore done is a single take, like Birdman, right? Mm-hmm. Except it's following Poe as he's walking down the streets of the last day of Poe's life. He's walking down the streets of Baltimore or wherever it was where he died, and you just follow. It's Jeffrey Combs doing the whole thing, and he's talking and he's going into bars
himself, so he's
and getting drinks.
Mind
well, you don't know. You might be a drinking buddy who's hanging out with him. Or you might, because you never see you, so you don't know. Are you there or are you not there? And I think that would be great because then you could preserve like just the constant flow of his performance.
That'd be hard to break up as a movie. I don't know. You'd have to reconsider it completely to be a functional. No, to be a movie with cuts. They couldn't have just like tried to adapt that because it was its own live experience.
Yeah, and this is why you don't have cuts in it. You just keep it going, and you could find some place, like I don't know, Prague or someplace with some oldish streets, and between that, throw up a couple of green screens, a little bit of set extension.
Hungary's used to long takes. Cool. Hungary's the place to do. They film all long takes all the time. Bellatar will shoot it for you, and you're set.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that idea.
Yeah, that's
great.
Yeah. Well, Robert, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast.
Thank you for bringing the scotch.
And there's enough left over for horror trivia night.
It just keeps going.
And you're coming to co-host with us this time, right? You're going to do a round?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent.
I have my questions already done.
Terrific.
Wow.
I was wondering if I should send them to you like in advance for like approval and stuff.
Sure. My approval process is usually, have we asked it in the past 6 months? If we have, it's in.
We don't want anyone listening to this to try to decipher what you guys are.
Better be humanoids.
So, do we know who's coming on next week yet?
I believe it'll be Adam Simon. Very excited. He's the showrunner and co-creator of Salem, but he also directed for Roger Corman Brain Damage. Mm-hmm. Is that the one? Yeah, Brain Dead. Brain Dead.
Pullman and Paxton.
With Bill, and good friend of Rodman Flenders, who was also on a show and a friend of ours. And
hey, ask the guy doing Salem to hire Bill. Bill would tear that stuff up.
Oh yeah, the dream scenes and stuff that they have, the kind of hallucinations.
Season 2 of Salem gets sick. Yeah. It's great.
I need to see it. I'm like really annoyed. I need to see it.
The first season, I was kind of, it had some lulls.
Yeah, some
but the second season, it like starts like a gunshot and goes.
I got to see if I can see it before he comes on.
Yeah, and he also directed that documentary, The American Nightmare.
Oh, great.
Which is excellent.
Yeah, it's a good one,
I didn't know he directed that also.
Yeah. No,
wow. he's that's based on the book, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he's an interesting character. He'll be a good guest. So
excellent.
We will see you here next week with him. Cool. And thanks again, Robert. See you soon.
Check out Love
Thank
Object.
you so much.
Love Object. It's on Netflix.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.